said that the human brain is the most complicated organ in the known universe. This can set us up for a lifetime of problems. And accelerated aging of the brain, our mind, which is far more expansive than just our body, our mind is actually... The first one is a food that looks like tiny little eyeballs. And this food is blueberries. Blueberries are actually rich in something called anthocyanins. And these are very potent antioxidants that have been found to bolster collagen structure, specifically in the retina, and provide vision protection. And this is according to Dr. Johanna Seedon, an expert on macular degeneration. And a specific peer-reviewed study, and this was published in the Journal of Neuroimmunology, found that blueberry anthocyanins may be able to reduce inflammation and oxidative stress that targets the retina. Now, these anthocyanins are also well noted to protect your retina against damage from UVA light exposure. A lot of folks don't realize that your eyes can actually get sunburned, all right? It's a crazy, crazy phenomenon, but these anthocyanins found in blueberries have been found to protect your eyes against sunburn. Now, another study, and this was conducted by researchers at the Russian Academy of Sciences, asserts that blueberries could significantly reduce the risk of cataracts. All right. Now, this just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. And make sure that you watch the YouTube version of this episode. After you listen to the audio, go back and make sure to watch the YouTube version so that you can see just how similar these foods that we cover today look like the body parts that they support and protect. Now, to dive into another study here, looking at macular degeneration specifically, this was a peer-reviewed study published in Advances in Nutrition, and it found that blueberries may actually help to significantly reduce the risk of macular degeneration. Now, these are conditions that are associated with aging. So blueberries have these capacities by many different factors. It's not just the anthocyanins that have this unique ability to defend the eyes, defend your vision from degradation, right? Especially from accelerated aging, slowing down that degradation and even potentially having some anti-aging effects. Now, this is just the first of these foods that throughout history, again, utilizing the doctrine of signatures, stating that certain foods, based on the way that they look, can potentially benefit the human body part that they resemble. All right, now, while blueberries are more noted to protect vision rather than to improve vision as of now in the peer-reviewed evidence, it's still a good idea to clearly see them as a health food. You see what I did there? Clearly see. So with blueberries, number one, wild blueberries are going to be ideal. This is because they're going to be packed with more adaptogenic compounds, because therefore in nature, these blueberries have to create compounds in order for them to defend themselves from environmental pressures, right? So when we have conventionally raised whatever, whether it's blueberries, whether it's tomatoes, whether it's fill in the blank, if they're not allowed to grow and develop in at least somewhat natural conditions, they're not going to be as robust and be triggered to produce a greater concentration of nutrients that helps to defend them in that environment. All right, so wild blueberries, so any wild food truly, these are more untouched or untampered with foods by humans as well. So that's a good call sign. All right, so if you can get some wild blueberries, especially there's companies that have frozen wild blueberries that you can utilize. The next step would be organic blueberries. Now, organic, there's a lot of debate going on today about whether or not the organic label is even credible. All right. Now, there are certain metrics that have to be followed in order for a company to get the organic certification. But, you know, with anything, marketers start to screw stuff up and take advantage of things. But as of now, we can rest assured to a significant degree that at least these blueberries aren't going to be sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, fungicides, suicides, homicide. Side means to kill. These compounds are well noted and well established to be either neurogenic or estrogenic and have very detrimental effects, specifically on our microbiome. One of the studies that we covered recently on the Model Health Show highlighted the fact that specific pesticides have been found to disrupt microbial gene expression. So disrupting the expression of the genes in your microbiome, your bacteria genes. And if we go gene for gene in the human body, over 99% of the genes that we carry are from bacteria, not our human genes. All right, if we're going gene for gene. So 99%. And we know that pesticides can definitely cause damage and disruption to microbial gene expression. And also they have to be estrogenic or neurogenic to either disrupt the reproductive cycle of pests, very small organisms, or the neurological cycle, the neurological connection, the brain, the nervous system of pests, so that they can't reproduce and so that they die off. So these things are designed to kill very small organisms. And our bodies are largely made of very small organisms, right? We have trillions and trillions and trillions of microorganisms that live in and on our bodies. So this haphazard use of these compounds has obviously been detrimental in our culture. And right now there are tens of thousands of chemicals that are approved for use in pesticides by the EPA. It's just gotten way out of hand. And so if we can do anything to avoid this, the better. So getting organic is going to be ideal. So wild blueberries, organic blueberries, but I still don't want us to be too neurotic, so if we do have some conventional berries every now and then, but berries are on that list of the dirty dozen, specifically strawberries is number one on the list of the quote dirty dozen that the Environmental Working Group has noted for us to be more cautious about in our consumption of these things, because they're going to have a higher concentration of pesticides and herbicides and things of that nature. And we might have this idea that we can simply wash them off, but these foods are grown in soil that is treated with these compounds. It's really, these toxic chemicals have integrated themselves into the cellular matrix of these foods. And so washing them off with a little veggie wash, that's just literally window dressing. That's really not getting to the root and understanding that it's really integrated itself. And so if we can avoid these things, it's a good idea. But again, any of us, myself included, I'm going to have foods that are not organic. But if I can choose, if I have an opportunity to choose organic, I'm going to choose organic. So there's a couple of insights there with blueberries to get the most out of them. How can we utilize them? Well, super easy to use. Obviously, throwing blueberries into a smoothie. There's a variety of different dishes that we can make with blueberries as well. We can toss them into salads. We can, have them in your yogurt if you're having, dairy or non-dairy yogurt. The list goes on and on. Just eating them by themselves in a fruit salad. Very, very versatile and easy to use. Blueberries for vision is number one on our list of these powerful 11 foods that resemble the body part that they nourished. Now we're going to move on to number 2 on our list. And the next one here is avocados. When the Aztecs discovered the avocado, they named it ahocado, which many references show the word translating to mean testicle. Now, just to be clear, this could have been a situation where the fruit itself was named avocado, but then when the Aztecs used the word, they used it interchangeably to mean testicles. For example, the Aztecs were out, maybe hunting or whatever, and we'll just say, one of the tribesmen, his name was Stan, because that was a big name back in those ancient Aztec times. Stan, all right, that part is made up, right? But, Stan gets a great kill, and then his friend is like, hey, Stan, you've got some massive avocados. All right, so maybe avocado meant avocado, but they use it interchangeably, the same way that we would use the word like nuts or balls in our culture to mean testicles. All right, but nuts are nuts. These are, walnuts, chestnuts, things of that nature. But just having that resemblance, people started calling them nuts at some point. Or balls. Balls are balls. Basketballs, soccer balls, but we also interchangeably refer to them as balls. So this could have been the case with avocado in its name, but it is connected to the reproductive system for both men and for women. Avocados are also said to resemble the uterus and even the ovaries. Again, definitely check out the video of this episode to see the resemblance, because the uterus itself resembles an avocado, but if you see the fallopian tubes, they sort of look like arms coming off of the uterus and then arms that are holding two avocados. It is remarkable to see firsthand. And also, if you think about a baby being the quote seed inside of the avocado, and you see that image as well, it's pretty interesting. Now, how does this play out in the real world? Is there any data to affirm that avocados are beneficial for reproductive health? Well, a joint study conducted by researchers at UC Davis, the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and The Ohio State University set out to analyze the benefits of avocados as it relates to women's reproductive health and fertility. They found that the fats and other nutrients from avocados can help improve fertility, support healthy pregnancy, and even support milk production while breastfeeding. They noted that more studies need to be done, but this early data is incredibly encouraging. So that is specifically looking at women's reproductive health. For men, the reproductive health benefits from avocados lie in their benefits in supporting healthy circulation, all right? Because that's what it's all about. It's about the flow. It's about the blood flow circulation. A study conducted by researchers at Penn State University put test participants into 3 different diet groups in a randomized order. They were either put into a low-fat diet group, a moderate fat diet group, or a moderate fat diet that included 1 avocado a day. When the test subjects' blood work was analyzed, after 5 weeks, the participants on the avocado diet had significantly lower levels of VLDL particles. So this is very low dense lipoprotein. And again, it's not as black and white as LDL is bad, HDL is good. LDL plays incredibly important roles in the human body. But the smaller, denser, very low dense lipoprotein particles have been well established to potentially have more problematic tendencies with their ability to get caught up in places that they shouldn't be and their propensity towards being oxidized. And that's even more important. They noted in the study that in the avocado group, they also had significantly lower levels of oxidized LDL cholesterol than what they saw in the low fat and moderate fat diets that didn't include the avocados. So the avocados had some really remarkable protective effects at protecting the cardiovascular system. Now, participants in the avocado group also had significantly higher levels of antioxidants, including lutein, which is a potent antioxidant, well noted to be beneficial to the cardiovascular system as well. And one of the researchers stated that the addition of the daily avocado helped to prevent the buildup of plaque in the arteries, thus being protective of the circulatory system. All right, again, it's with male reproductive, all of us, but with the male reproductive system, specifically, the circulation matters. All right. Now you see here, there's like a little Antonio Banderas in there. When I said it, circulation matters. And avocados appear to be very protective and supportive of healthy circulation. All right, so avocados resembling the womb, resembling the ovaries, resembling the testicles. There is a little bit of data to support this for sure. And the question is, of course, do we utilize this to our advantage? We know that they're an incredible source of monounsaturated fats, which have tremendous data now looking at longevity associated with the consumption of monounsaturated fats from real whole food sources. And also, it's just packed with a plethora of other nutrients. It's one of the best sources of potassium, which is incredibly important for healthy blood composition, circulation, all those things as well. And an important part in that combination, the sodium-potassium pump for all of our cells and specifically our mitochondria to be able to function properly. The list goes on and on and on. So how do we utilize avocados and get the most out of them? Well, first of all, avocados are really moody, all right? This could be another sign that they're reminiscent of male and female reproduction because they're moody. Like they're like unripe, ripe for like half a day, then they're nasty after that. All right. Then they just quit on you. All right. They're very moody. They're very like, you got a certain window of opportunity where they're fertile to eat. Come on. You see, I'm tying it together. But truly, what can we do to extend that fertility window, that ovulation window for avocados? Here's a super incredible tip that I just learned recently, like the last couple of years. Once your avocados start to, because you'll know like, okay, this avocado is going to be good tomorrow. But then if you don't get to it, it might be a wrap. When your avocado is just reaching that point of ripeness, and maybe you've got a bunch of them, put them in the refrigerator, stash them in the fridge, and that can extend its window of opportunity, extend its ability to be fresh and to maintain that gorgeousness that we want to see when we open up an avocado. Stash it in the refrigerator. It extends that lifespan of ripeness and deliciousness for a couple of days. All right, so leave them to sit out so that they can ripen, on the counter, but then stash them in the fridge once they reach that point of ripeness. All right, so there's a little bit of a tip there. And also, now this is gonna sound crazy, but when they're ripe, you can also freeze the avocados. All right, now this might be good for use if you're putting avocados into smoothies, for example, or if you're using it, you can just unthaw it to whip up some guacamole. All right, so there's a couple of tips because avocados can be a little bit moody. All right, so also if we can get avocados organic, if we can, when we have the opportunity, all good. But this isn't on that list of the dirty dozen. Avocados do appear to be a little bit more resilient when they're conventionally grown. So just keep that in context. And what are we using it for? Well, obviously I mentioned some folks have never even experienced putting avocado in a smoothie. If you have the right recipe, it's amazing. It's so amazing, so creamy and smooth. Also, you can make a great pudding with avocado, adding in some high quality chocolate and some other ingredients. Obviously guacamole, and I like to say that guacamole is what happens when an avocado gets its wings. All right, that's what there's an angel song, okay? But also we can utilize it, obviously tossing in a salad, in sushi rolls. You could even do some mock tuna or mock salmon sushi rolls, or you can add avocados to a plethora of other dishes. It's just one of those great sides that really pair well with so many different foods. So the versatile avocado and its benefits on human reproduction. All right, now we're going to move on to number 3 on our list. And number 3 is ginseng. Now, hopefully, again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that ginseng sort of looks very human-like in its presentation. All right, the particular picture, there's one of the images has a bunch of ginseng in a bowl, and it looks like a bunch of people laying around on the couch, like mingling and having a good time. All right, that's how ginseng looks. So if we're talking about ginseng, we're talking about it being viewed as a whole body tonic and a whole human vitalizer. So it's all about energy. So what does the data show? Well, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study published in the journal PLOS One found that after 4 weeks, participants using ginseng experienced less physical and mental fatigue, and were also found to have less oxidative stress than those taking the placebo. All right, and that oxidative stress, that's associated with aging. We're going to all experience some oxidative stress, but when it becomes excessive, like all the things that our cells are battling with today in our very abnormal environment, it's leading to accelerated aging. Now, that's just one. There's so many aspects here with ginseng really operating as a whole human vitalizer. Another study, and this was published in the International Journal of Impotence Research. Now, again, this is going back and kind of parlaying. You see, this was back to back with avocado for good reason. And what they did was they put ginseng head to head with the placebo and head to head against a drug used for erectile dysfunction. 30 men were placed into each group. The ginseng group the erectile dysfunction drug group, and the placebo group. Although complete remission was not seen in any of the groups, the participants receiving ginseng had a 60% improvement in erectile dysfunction symptoms, compared to just a 30% improvement from the medication and a 30% improvement in the placebo group. Again, the medication was only effective as the placebo. And this is what's consistently seen in clinical trials as a little sidebar, is that in clinical trials, when there is a belief system around a medication that it might be treating a particular issue, and there's a positive association, for example, a blood pressure medication or something to help to manage and normalize blood sugar, the list goes on and on and on. In clinical trials, just the belief that this drug is going to have a therapeutic effect leads to the therapeutic effect happening more often than not. As a matter of fact, in clinical trials, placebos are somewhere in the ballpark of about 33% effective on average for addressing that chronic issue or acute issue that the researchers are trying to target. So we have to account in clinical trials, we have to account for the placebo having a therapeutic effect, like what was seen here in this study. The placebo was comparative. The placebo performed just as well as the medication, but what performed better than both of them was ginseng. Now let's look at energy again in a more specific way. What about when you're dealing with extreme conditions? Our conventional cancer treatments are well noted to carry chronic fatigue as a major side effect. Well, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial cited in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute showed that cancer survivors utilizing ginseng had significantly lower fatigue levels than those in the placebo group. All right, so again, how often do you hear things like this that can start to stack conditions in people's favor, regardless of the situation that they find themselves in? There's so much to behold from the incredible foods that have been around for thousands of years throughout human evolution to fortify and support human health. And now, again, many of the peer-reviewed journals that are focused on pharmacology are giving so much credibility. Really, this is where the credibility is with real food, because it's coming along without detrimental side effects. That's the key. The side effects that come coupled with all of these recent drug inventions, again, these things were made recently. We might have a new drug that was invented, last year, whereas we have human genes and gene expression in our DNA has been evolving for hundreds of thousands of years and have never interacted with this brand new thing. What's going to be the outcome? Well, when we have this term side effect, it's not really a side effect at all. It's a direct effect, because every single cell in your body is going to be affected when you consume anything. That's what's so crazy about our system today. It is so hyper-focused on compartmentalizing human health, right? So this particular thing is only going to affect pancreas function, or this particular thing is only going to affect the brain. This particular thing is only going to affect the heart. This is a heart medication. This is a cardiovascular system medication. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's affecting everything. All right. So even going back to the research that we covered on blueberries, for example, there's a tremendous amount of research now identifying benefits with blueberries. We just targeted the thing that they look like. Great for the eyes, but if it's great for the eyes, it's also probably great for the heart. There's a tremendous amount of data on blueberries being beneficial for helping to manage blood pressure, helping to improve the health of our microbiome. And even a study conducted by researchers at the University of Michigan published data finding that blueberry intake can potentially affect genes related to fat burning. So it's an epigenetic influence, right? So if we look at the fields of nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics and understanding how food, literally every bite of food that we eat has an impact on our gene expression. And also our genes have an influence on which foods are going to be good for us and going to be ideal for us. And so keeping all these things in context in a world that compartmentalizes things, we want to think bigger than that. However, It can be really powerful and a great affirmation when we do learn about certain foods that do have clinical evidence in their resonance with certain human body parts that they just so happen to look like as well. So with ginseng, there's a wide range of types of ginseng, and this is something that you can experiment and try out different forms of ginseng. They're generally found in supplemental forms, so in capsules or ginseng powder that can be added to different dishes, that can be added to smoothies and things of that nature. They're also found readily in teas. Again, organic if you can. It's always great to be conscientious about the sources that you choose for any supplements, especially. So ginseng is that whole body tonic. It's sort of, again, coming out looking like a human who's, maybe doing a little dance or something like that. So shout out to ginseng. All right, we're going to move on to number 4 on our list. And if this one wasn't one of the more Captain Obvious ones, and this is the kidney bean resembling the kidneys. One of the major roles of the kidneys that most folks don't realize is in helping to manage the cardiovascular system. Your kidneys literally function as a filter to remove excess metabolic waste products from your system. They're incredibly important, and also helping to remove excess fluids from the system. And a big workload of filtering your blood is taken on by the kidneys. Your kidneys filter about 200 quarts of your blood each and every day. Your kidneys also, and how they really relate to the health of our blood and managing the cardiovascular system, your kidneys work along with your brain to manage your blood pressure. When we think about blood pressure, we tend to think about the heart, the arteries. Maybe we might consider that. We just think that that's all handling itself, but it's really your brain and your kidneys that are major regulators of what your circulatory system is doing. And so your kidneys and your brain are sending hormonal messages that either relax or constrict your blood vessels. This is how important our kidneys are. And to take it a step further, your kidneys actually produce the hormone, erythropoietin, that tells your bone marrow to make new red blood cells. So to make your red blood cells, your kidneys are the organ that's like sending the command for it to get done. Super, super powerful stuff. Now, when it comes to regulating the blood, it's no wonder that this powerful organ's namesake, the kidney bean, has some targeted effects. A randomized crossover trial published in the journal Nutrition, Metabolism, and Cardiovascular Diseases found that kidney beans elicit a positive effect on relaxing blood vessels for several hours after eating. Kidney beans are also a dense source of other healthy blood supporting compounds, things that are needed to literally build our blood, like iron and potassium. And they're also a great source of anthocyanins. All right, those anthocyanins that we talked about a little bit earlier in our conversation about blueberries. So and if we're talking about antioxidants, a great way to identify antioxidants in that spectrum is colors. So again, this doctrine of signatures. Certain colors relate to certain antioxidants. So that kind of bluish reddish hue is a good indicator that it's going to be a source of anthocyanins, for example. So again, nature didn't come without instructions. And if we can tap into a little bit more of what our ancestors knew in our relationship with these foods in the human body, I think we're going to be better for it. So kidney beans, helping to benefit the kidneys through the dynamic of helping to relax the blood vessels and normalizing blood pressure, especially in the context of folks who have hypertension. So that is number 4 on our list of these incredible foods that resemble the body parts that they are good for. Your brain, you've probably heard this before, but we're going to take this to another level today. Your brain is mostly made of water. It's upwards of about 80% water. Your brain is actually the consistency of soft butter. You know, when you leave the butter sitting out, well, some folks just do that. They leave the butter sitting out on the table. They got the glass thing over the butter. Some people are appalled by that. You don't keep the butter out. You keep the butter in the fridge. But the consistency of the human brain is the same as soft butter. Now, that being said, your brain is upwards of 80% water. Here's why this matters. Your brain cells themselves, when I talked about food making up your body, water supersedes everything. And you want to think of water in a nutritional context, because we tend to put food and water. We tend to separate things. But most food is abundant in water, just in nature. Water is the looked over macronutrient. All right, we have 5 major macronutrients, not 3: fats, proteins, carbohydrates. Alcohol is another macronutrient. We talk about that in Eat Smarter too. It's going to trip you out. Water, the most powerful of all the macronutrients, because it makes up the most of your body and your body's performance. A recent study cited in Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise that I highlight in Eat Smarter found that just a 2% drop in your body's baseline hydration level can lead to impairment in mental tasks requiring your attention, motor coordination, and executive functions. So this is the prefrontal cortex determining your ability to problem solve. They mention things like map recognition goes down. So just finding your way around. I know we've got the GPS now. All right. But do you remember when you just used to have to find something? All right. Our ability to do that plummets. Grammatical reasoning, proofreading, mental math, all of those things, just a 2% drop in our optimal hydration rate causes these side effects. Tell me again what kind of pill you're looking for to make your brain work better. It starts with water. It's foundational, because all of your neurons, your dendrites and axon terminals, the things that I mentioned earlier, these are all operating in a water medium. It's how everything is communicating and being moved throughout your brain is based on a water superhighway. Now, here's something really cool. This is going to take this from the foundational level up a notch. It's not just water in of itself. Your brain, the blood-brain barrier, has superhighways, express pathways for water to get to your brain, because it's that important. All right. So when you're hydrating, when you're drinking that water, hopefully you're getting a little thirsty right now. When you're guzzling that water, just know, like, oh man, this is definitely going right to my brain, because that hungry brain of yours is very, very dedicated to ensuring that it's getting the water that it needs. Now, here's the thing, and I've been talking about this for many years now. Nationwide, worldwide, the public at large gets access to this information. That's the virility of a book and the ability to get into people's hands that in other circumstances wouldn't get access to this information. It's very, very powerful and special. But when I was in school, even in my traditional university classes, I was taught the importance of H2O. We were taught water is H2O. But the truth is, H2O does not exist anywhere in nature. It doesn't exist anywhere in nature. Now, I know you're like, what is he talking about? Water is known as the universal solvent. You will not find H2O by itself anywhere in nature. It's always integrated with other things, namely minerals. All right, so it's H2O with other things dissolved into it. Constantly, that's what's happening in nature. All right, so do we want to drink pure H2O? No, absolutely not. Humans have never drank pure H2O. It's always H2O with other things integrated into it. And so we do have systems of cleaning our water, of course, that we want to be mindful of to eliminate pathogens and potential chemicals and things like that. So we could do reverse osmosis or whatever the case might be. There's many different ways to go about finding clean water sources, but we have to be mindful that water needs structure. Your water and your brain need the number one thing that should be coming along with your water, which is electrolytes. For example, sodium. Not only does this electrolyte help to maintain proper water balance, so number one, it helps to maintain the water balance in your brain. You need sodium for this purpose. These electrolytes are, and even listen to the word, electro. Light, right? We lighten it up. Electrolytes. These are minerals that carry an electric charge. What kind of currency is your brain running on? These electrical currencies. The human brain is critically dependent upon electrolytes to send electric signals throughout all the cells in your brain. This is how important electrolytes are. It's not just about, we know about it from the commercials. We got the sweat. We need to get the electrolytes. Your brain primarily is going to be looking for these electrolytes to keep the lights on. So in mentioning sodium, and this is one of the cool studies that's highlighted in Eat Smarter, researchers at McGill University found that sodium literally functions as an on-off switch in the brain for specific neurotransmitters that support optimal function and protect the brain against numerous diseases. All right, this is how important these electrolytes are. It's like an on-off switch for your brain to actually do processes and protect itself. In our culture, sodium and salt are synonymous because salt is our greatest source in our diets of sodium, but they're two different things, right? Sodium chloride. So we want to be aware of that little distinction, but we do want to be aware that salt historically, and we actually dive into that in depth in Eat Smarter, it's been one of the most valuable things in human evolution is sources of salt. But the salt that most of us get in our diets is from processed foods. That is a heavily refined, just denatured, processed, toxicant added, fillers and preservatives. Not that kind of salt. We're talking about real salt from nature. All right. There's so many different types of high quality salt, but this might be something you might want to add to your water to provide it some structure and also to provide those electrolytes for your brain. Also, of course, natural foods are abundant. They're absolutely abundant in electrolytes, particularly fruits and vegetables. So this is just one electrolyte, but I cannot not tell you this. You've got to know this one today. There is another massively overlooked and underestimated electrolyte that affects so many different parts of our performance and our biology overall. And specifically today, you're going to know how important it is for the function and performance of your brain. A fascinating new study published in the journal Neuron found that magnesium is able to restore critical brain plasticity and improve cognitive performance. This electrolyte is able to literally restore brain plasticity. And brain plasticity is the ability of your brain to adapt and to change. This was a thing that was believed to not be possible for many years. That the brain, you got what you got. You got what you got, and it's just degradation from there on out. However, today we know that we can improve the brain. We can grow new brain cells in certain parts of the brain, and your brain can evolve and change and grow and adapt. Magnesium is critical in this performance. And here's another one. A double-blind, placebo-controlled study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that improving magnesium levels in adult test subjects, these were folks at risk in their elderly years, so around between 50 and 70, could potentially reverse brain aging by over 9 years. Improving their magnesium levels could reverse brain aging by over 9 years. This is something you just don't hear about. Even with Alzheimer's, it's just largely considered to be, there's nothing you can do about it. You can try to slow it down. We're starting to finally understand there are things we can do to help to reverse and protect the brain, but also reverse the degradation. Magnesium is critical in this. It's another powerful electrolyte, but magnesium, as I'm really highlighting throughout Eat Smarter in relationship to metabolism, cognitive performance, our emotional intelligence, it's an important anti-stress buffer, but it's responsible for over 650 biochemical processes we're aware of. Just a couple years ago, it was 350 that we knew about, we can confirm. Now 650. That means it's 650 things your body cannot do or do properly without adequate levels of magnesium. Guess what the number one mineral deficiency is in our country? Magnesium. About 60% of the population is chronically deficient in this powerful anti-stress, brain fortifying mineral. We have to change it. People are walking around with brains that are just not working right and wondering why we can't get along and we can't ask questions. We can't have high level, evolved, intelligent conversations. We have to get our brains healthier so we can make this stuff happen. It's not that it's impossible. If our brain health isn't well, it just makes it harder. What if we make it easier to have connection? This is one of those things. And now we're going to talk about the other constituents that make up the human brain and what we need to bring in dietarily. And in looking at the brain being around 80% water, what else is it made of? And that next factor of those micronutrients is fat. All right. This is the one that's in popular culture that's talked about a lot in the world of health and nutrition. Your brain is mostly made of fat. It's actually water predominantly, but that ratio of fat is also incredibly important. If we're talking about the dry weight of the brain, if you want to look at it like that, your brain is about 11% fat, followed closely by about 8% proteins, 3% minerals, and a little sprinkling of the carbs and other compounds, because the carbohydrate or sugar molecules that are floating around in the body, your brain uses that stuff very quickly. All right, so it's not a lot just kind of hanging out in the human brain, but about 11% fat, 8% proteins. All right, these amino acids are very important as well, but let's focus on fat. All right, you got that fat head. All right, this was a universal diss. All right, being called a fat head. Hey, fat head. It wasn't cool, but now you're gonna know. Fathead is actually, it's pretty dope. It's pretty sexy. All right, now, this is the thing. When we think about the brain mostly being fat, it's not that the fats that you eat dietarily directly end up in your brain. We have to get clear on this, okay? Eating fat does not make you fat directly, and also eating fat does not directly feed your fat brain. All right, these are two different things biochemically: fat in food and fat in your brain and on your tissues. And this leads us to the conversation about the different types of fat in the human body. All right, in the first section, focused on metabolism in Eat Smarter, we talk about storage fats. So these are fats that actually store energy that we evolved to have that are critical to our survival, right? These storage fats, this is the white adipose tissue. This is the subcutaneous fat, the visceral fat, and the intramuscular fat. These are storage fats. Your brain does not have storage fats. This is something totally different. These are structural fats. The human brain is structural fats, not storage fats. It's an evolutionary development because in times of famine, if your brain was made of storage fats, theoretically speaking, your body would start to eat your brain. Your brain would eat itself. And like built-in zombie food, basically, if you were experiencing a time when you didn't have food. So this is why the brain itself is not made of storage fats. It's made of structural fats. And so in creating that structure, a lot of the structural fats are actually developed and kind of infused into our brains when we're babies, right? When we're little babies, all right? Specifically, saturated fat. Critical to brain development. All right. The brain is sopping up saturated fats like a biscuit. When you're a baby, mother's milk is upwards of 50% saturated fat. Did nature make a mistake? Saturated fat's been vilified, then vindicated, then vilified and vindicated. And then even now, like recently, it came out again, saturated fats, it's gonna kill you. It's a big difference between saturated fats found in processed foods and also saturated fats found in nature. Right off the bat, that differentiation is typically not made when you hear these studies about how bad saturated fat is. But just look at the number one primary human food. You know, mother's milk, breast milk, being upwards of 50%, you know, could be 30%, 40%, upwards of 50% saturated fat. And it's primarily going to feed the developing human brain, the most complex, powerful entity in the known universe. Now, here's the rub. Those receptors are those channels to allow saturated fat into the human brain through the blood-brain barrier. When you're an infant and then moving into early childhood, they're open. But as time goes on, those receptors and the accessibility in the human brain to absorb saturated fats into the brain itself goes down until when you reach adulthood, they're all but shut off. But saturated fat is so important that the human brain will make it itself. Your brain as an adult, if it needs to, it'll make saturated fat itself. Crazy. Crazy. However, dietarily speaking, much of the saturated fat we might consume in our diet as an adult does not go to your brain. Okay? So I just want to share that little tidbit there and understand that, again, the fat in foods does not directly translate to the fat on our bodies, right? Storage fat or structural fats. But there are specific fats that do contribute to the performance and rebuilding your structural fats in your brain. And let's talk about what those are. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition discovered that increasing dietary levels of DHA, the essential omega-3 fat DHA, was able to improve both memory and reaction time in healthy test subjects. DHA is such a critical part of memory formation that you can literally forget about making memories without it. You need DHA. It is so important as a structural fat and also in enabling and supporting communication between your brain cells. DHA is essential. Now, this gets into the conversation about this omega-3 category of essential fats. There's so many different types. Omega-6s are also essential fatty acids, and we need them, but our diets are now so skewed in the amounts of omega-3s we're getting versus omega-6. And so we go into that in the relevance with metabolism, but also in relevance with brain health today in the average American diet, which historically we'd have around 3-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Omega-6s are more noted to be the pro-inflammatory omega fatty acids, which we need them. We need them for certain processes, but being that they're pro-inflammatory, they can cause some major problems and also major problems with inflammation in our brain, which we'll get to in a moment. But the omega-3s are the anti-inflammatory category, and we need them as well to help to maintain that balance. And so, being that this is the case, we have to put a greater emphasis today more than ever, and everybody listening from this day forward, put an emphasis on getting DHA and EPA into your bodies. Your brain needs it. It craves it. It's one of the most important nutrients that we're simply not getting enough of. And most of us have no idea. This particular nutrient directly improves your memory. All right. We have study after study after study I put in Eat Smarter demonstrating how DHA and EPA specifically help to improve your memory. All right. It's clinically proven, study after study. Now, here's the other side of the conversation. These are so important for the structural integrity of the brain. Again, we're talking about structural fats and structural integrity. These are so important for the structural integrity of the brain that a study published in the journal Neurology using MRIs revealed that people consuming the lowest amount of EPA and DHA in their diets had accelerated brain shrinkage. Their brains were literally shrinking. This isn't the kind of shrinking when it's cold outside. All right, this isn't that kind of shrinkage. This isn't like, oh, the water, you get in the cold water and there's get some shrinkage. This is more of like the permanent kind, okay? Don't touch me, it's a shrinkage, it's cold. No, this is like, oh, my brain could be messed up for the rest of my life and cause degradation in my cognitive performance. We have to protect our brains and provide these essential nutrients. So EPA and DHA. They stated in the study that people who ate the least amount of DHA, which was less than 4 grams in this study, showed the highest rates of brain shrinkage, while those who ate 6 grams or more had the healthiest shrink-proofed brains. That barometer, that baseline is just about a teaspoon, a little more than a teaspoon a day, protected against accelerated brain aging and shrinkage. Nobody likes shrinkage. You want to be at your full glory. All right? Now, where are we going to get these from? Where are we getting our DHA and EPA? For most folks, it's attributed to fish and fish oil, but Eat Smarter is really a unifier. It's a unifier of all diet frameworks. So regardless of what diet framework you might have been subscribing to, whether it's vegan, whether it's paleo, whether it's keto, whether it's pescatarian, whatever the case might be, it is addressing the most powerful principles, and nutrients across the board, regardless of your diet framework. It's a unifier. Nobody's excluded. All right. And also, we're looking at what are the specific things in all of those diets that could damage your brain, that are common in various diets that can damage your brain and lead to accelerated brain aging, but also accelerated development of body fat, regardless of what diet you're on. So these are the things. Again, it's a great unifier. So being that most folks attribute DHA, EPA, omega-3s to fatty fish, if you look at the data, these are great sources, including wild-caught salmon, herring, sardines, mackerel. But in our conversation that we've had with Dr. Lisa Mosconi, neuroscientist, she shared that, for example, one of the food sources that supersedes fish is caviar and salmon roe. So the salmon roe, the salmon eggs are upwards of 3 times more DHA per gram than the fish itself. It's packed. It's insane how much DHA and EPA you'll find in caviar and salmon roe. And when she told me about caviar, I'll just be real. I had my pinky up like, oh, really? Like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous is what came up for me. Robin Leach. I don't know if people, if you're a little younger, you might not know. I don't know. But it was Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I think it would come on for me, I guess I saw the replay, but Saturday night, Friday night. It was late Friday night. And late Friday night, because I would go to bed. I had to go to bed with my little brother and sister just so they go to bed, because my mom didn't want to show that there was some kind, I was her favorite, clearly. She didn't want to show that. So she'd be like, go to bed with your little brother and sister, and then when they go to sleep, you can come back and you can watch TV, hang out, all right? So I would do that Friday nights. They go to bed, maybe we'll just say 9 o'clock. Can I tell you how hurt I was when I would accidentally fall asleep? Because I'm just waiting for them to go to sleep. And then sometimes I open my eyes and it's Saturday and I'd be pissed. I missed all that good hanging out, all that good TV and the snacks that would come along with it. All right, because my stepdad would come in, he gets off work around 11. He comes in, he brings the pizza, all kinds of just adventures. But anyways, on the nights when I was successful in staying awake and watching TV, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, they take you and show you the lavish life, right? Then we had MTV Cribs, kind of transmuted into the more recent evolution of that show. But it would be Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, Twilight Zone. Oh, come on, freaky stuff right there. And Nightmare on Elm Street, the series. What was my mother let me do? I was like 7, 8, watching Freddy Krueger, freaking me out. I was addicted to getting freaked out. All right. And then eventually it'd be like Friday night videos too, because we didn't have that cable. That's a super luxury. But Friday nights you get to see the videos, Friday night videos. So it's a whole vibe. But being that this is the case of in our minds psychologically, we'll hear certain foods and we're just like, that's not for me, or that's this, that's that. Let's just bring this down to number one, the connection with humanity throughout our history and our evolution. Humans have been eating what we call this food caviar, salmon roe, the fish eggs, for centuries, long time. But also then you might be like, I'm not feeling that. I'm just, regardless of if humans been eating it, I'm not really feeling it. That's great because we have other options. There's so many different ways, creative ways. But we also I want to encourage people, and this was just a strong tenet throughout Eat Smarter, is to look to food first. We want to do our best to get our sources of, right now we're talking about DHA and EPA, from foods that folks have been eating for centuries, for thousands of years, because our genes have a connection. Our DNA is connected to these foods, right? And so with that said, as we make the pivot from the fish sources, for folks who are taking a vegan and vegetarian protocol, we have to look at where you lie on the spectrum and get this bit of information, because automatically, and this is what I believed 10 years ago, when I was working in my clinical practice, you can get your omega-3s from plant sources. But I didn't really realize it. I took it at face value that omega-3s were created equal. There are so many different types of essentially all the nutrients that we've discovered. There are different types. There's different types of magnesium. There's different types of vitamin C. There's different types of omega-3s. DHA and EPA are two types of omega-3 fatty acids. The plant version is ALA, and it is nowhere near as remotely qualified or even enabled to get into the human brain and to nourish the brain like we've been talking about. It's just not the same. It doesn't work that way. But DHA and EPA are so essential for the human brain. Your body will convert some of the ALA you consume through plant sources into DHA, but it doesn't do it very well. About 80% of the ALA plant source omega-3s you consume get lost in the conversion process. So you need to know that. This isn't something you just, I'll just get this plant source and I'm going to be okay. I'm telling you, your brain is so dependent on DHA and EPA for proper functioning. This is not something to play with. You got to figure out a way to get high quality DHA and EPA specifically for your brain. So how do we do that on this protocol of vegan vegetarian? Then we move to from the category of fish and fish oil, which we'll talk about in a minute. As a matter of fact, let's just hit that really quickly, because this is what most folks think about fish and fish oil. A randomized, placebo-controlled study cited in Nutrition Journal found that test subjects taking just 3 grams of fish oil per day for 5 weeks significantly improved cognitive performance compared to folks taking a placebo. Directly, we got the data. 99% of the evidence on omega-3s and where to get the DHA and EPA, fish oil is what's tested. The next tier, which we now have more and more evidence coming out, and this might be something that lies on a spectrum if you're doing a vegetarian approach, krill oil, right? Krill oil, K-R-I-L-L, krill oil. Really rich in astaxanthin. It's powerful antioxidants, so many cool things with that. We have some evidence showing that this can be a source to help to feed our brain. So that, and what is krill? It's a super duper microscopic organism, microscopic shrimp. But when you hear shrimp, then you might think, no, I'm not going to kill a super duper microscopic baby shrimp. All right, because I'm vegetarian. This is like, I think you'll probably be, there's probably more like organisms in the air that you are like when you swallow than what you're getting, when you're doing the krill oil. All right. So it's like it's very super microscopic shrimp, but even still that might, for your ethics, might not lie in a place that you're comfortable with, and that's okay. But I just want you to know, fish oil has the evidence. We know it works. All right. Krill oil has some evidence. We're starting to understand that it works. The other source, if we're going to do the full plant source, would be algae, an algae oil. And there's not a lot of clinical evidence in its efficacy for directly feeding the brain. Not yet, but we do know that the DHA exists, that it's there. That's measurable. So I'm a fan. Of course, for me, I'd want to see more evidence so I can just make a very definitive guidance for folks who are doing a plant-based protocol. But please, if that's where we're at, get an algae oil. Please do that. Take care of that incredible brain of yours. You need DHA, you need EPA. In addition, what about the food source itself? Let's circle back. Food source alert. Let's circle back. Does eating fish actually translate over into improved cognitive performance? I got you. In the data, 2 to 3 servings of fish per week appears to be ideal, but this is noted in a study conducted by researchers at Rush University Medical Center found that adults who eat at least 1 seafood meal per week do, in fact, perform better on cognitive skills tests than people who eat less than 1 seafood meal per week. Just 1. Smarter. Foods are literally building what your brain is made of. Eating smarter can make you smarter, but there's a spectrum that we go through. And as we're going to talk about more plant-based options today as well, but we have to feed our brain. And we're going to kick things off with something called phospholipids. All right, phospholipids. This specific category of fats are one of the primary things that the human brain is made of. Now, phospholipids are made almost entirely out of omega-3, DHA, and EPA. We're going to talk more about that soon, but phospholipids can also be consumed specifically directly from our diet as well. And we're going to talk about some dense food sources. But let's share a little bit about what phospholipids do. Phospholipids help to provide shape, strength, and elasticity for our brain cells. All right? Shape, strength, and elasticity. We also want our brain cells to have a healthy shape and consistency. Abnormalities with the shape of our cells can definitely be problematic. And also strength. Strength not to just contain and create the structure of the cell itself, but to withstand intrusions, to be able to withstand damage, and also to generate a lot of energy. All right, so this is why these three things are important, and this is why phospholipids are important. But how does this play out in the research? Because one of the most interesting things about phospholipids is that they have a very powerful contribution to cellular communication. So enabling our cells to talk to each other, or signal transduction for data, for information to get communicated throughout your brain cells, which again, when it really boils down to it, that's what we want. We don't want just to have a brain. We want to have a high performing brain. We want our brain to be firing on all cylinders. We want a healthy memory. We want healthy reaction time. We want the ability to focus. The list goes on and on and on. So what do phospholipids contribute in that domain? Well, a big part of this is phospholipids' ability to support mental performance under stress. A recent double-blind, placebo-controlled trial found that the consumption of phospholipids helps to enhance attention and improve reaction time when test subjects were placed under acute stress. So they were putting them under stress, and the consumption of these phospholipids helped them to maintain their focus and to enhance their attention even under that acute stressor. Now, this study had participants to also report their subjective experience, and they reported reduced participation anxiety, which is a big issue today. You know, if you've got anxiety around test taking or doing a certain presentation or performance, phospholipids can really help in this. And also, the test subjects reported an increased sense of mental energy. All right, so again, that's what it's really all about. It's not just having a brain, but it's having a high performing brain with a lot of healthy, vivacious, robust energy. Now, we know a little bit about what these phospholipids bring to the table. Again, this is just 1/3 of the fats that the brain is primarily made out of, but it's very important. So what are some of the specific food sources where we can find these phospholipids? Well, phospholipids can be found directly from foods like fish, specifically fatty fish, like salmon, like herring, like mackerel, but also crab meat, also salmon roe and caviar. So those are fish eggs. All right, so there's a very dense source of phospholipids that are found in the eggs of the fish, even more so than the fish itself. Also, soybeans, milk, oats, and sunflower seeds are all viable sources of phospholipids that your brain literally, it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier and to feed and support and to create these building blocks for our brain cells themselves. All right, so now we can get into a debate about which food is going to be ideal from all these different ones that I'm listing. I'm just listing where the data shows they're a viable, clinically proven source of these phospholipids. But at the end of the day, it's always going to depend on you. Which food source is going to be ideal based on your unique needs, your unique metabolic fingerprint. All right. But we're just going to provide a plethora of different options today, things to think about, things to explore, and things to have fun with. So again, those are some proficient sources of phospholipids. But one of the most nutrient-dense sources of phospholipids that you're going to find that has about 10,000 milligrams of phospholipids per 100 grams of product is going to be egg yolks. All right, egg yolks have a tremendous amount of phospholipids, bioavailable phospholipids. So those are some different foods to look for. Now, we're going to move on. We mentioned these phospholipids are just 1/3 of the primary fats that the brain is made of. Again, upwards of about 60% of the dry weight of the human brain is made of fats. But there are 3 types of fats that are often not talked about. Number 1 is phospholipids. Number 2 are called sphingolipids. Sphingolipids function as building blocks of biological membranes and play important signaling and regulatory roles within the cell. All right, so we're talking about the membrane of the cell. And if you listen, there's brain in that word, membrane. For many years, it was considered that the nucleus of our cells throughout our bodies was really considered to be the brain of the cell. But you can actually remove the nucleus of the cell. And we talked about this with the incredible Dr. Bruce Lipton, cell biologist, and really one of the pioneers in epigenetics. And he would do this work decades and decades ago, removing the nucleus, but the cell was able to continue on performing many of the same functions even without its brain. When we remove your brain, we can't do anything. All right. So having that parallel that the nucleus is the brain of the cell, which is what I was taught in my elementary and middle school and even high school and beyond, even college biology classes, that's kind of the parallel that's made. But the membrane of the cell has a tremendous amount of intelligence and really functions in communication with all of our cells. Right? So being able to think and to respond to the environment, that's really powerful. And this is a big role that our sphingolipids play. And these are not just located, again, just in our brain, but throughout our bodies, which is the case for many of these different types of fats. But specifically, sphingolipids make up another one of the 1/3 of the most abundant fats in the human brain. Sphingolipids can literally change the architecture of our brain cells. They can literally alter the dynamic functions that a cell membrane participates in, and they can enable them to do things in a different way. So they can help our brain cells to adapt and change and to do things in a different way. How important is that if we experience any type of damage and we think that if this one pathway isn't working, what are we going to do? How are we going to be able to perform? How are we going to be able to move on? And it's very similar to life itself. When an obstacle comes up in our way, if it's on your GPS and you've got an app like Waze, for example, it finds another route. That's not just out here in the external world. Our bodies do that as well. So sphingolipids help our brain cells to find another way. It helps our nervous system to find another way, another path, because there's always a solution. Also, they're involved in intracellular signaling that can alter the behavior of our cells altogether. So intracellular, so the communication within the cell itself, and it can totally alter the behavior of our cells. It's really powerful to be able to influence the behavior of our cells like that. Really, really remarkable stuff. Sphingolipids. Now, these sphingolipids are not merely structural elements, but they're also recognized as regulators of our cellular events. They actually play a tremendous role in things like cancer prevention. All right. Now, obviously, we can have cancer show up in a myriad of different tissues and organ systems in the human body, including the brain. Now, sphingolipids assist in limiting cell replication. So they're helping to make sure that the cell replication process is taking place normally. And when things start to go abnormally, like things going past that Hayflick limit where they're not supposed to replicate anymore, where cancer can kind of just have this unlimited growth, sphingolipids help to make sure that that stays in check. Very, very important. They also, within that, can help to signal apoptosis, which is a programmed cell death when the cells are going too far. They're just trying to take over things, trying to take over, the entire community and do what they want. Sphingolipids help to take out rogue cells if necessary. And also dysregulation of our sphingolipids are heavily implicated, not just in cancer, but also in neurodegenerative diseases. When these sphingolipids are functioning abnormally or there's some kind of deficiency taking place, this is when we see a rapid decline in our cognitive health. Now, what are some sources? What are some food sources of these all-important sphingolipids? Now, these, again, are structural fats, and these are maintenance and fats that have a purpose and performance. So these are fats. They are going to have a parallel with our dietary fats. These are oftentimes the building blocks for these things, but it doesn't always necessarily translate. But we do know that sphingolipids, dense food sources, are available, and these are some of the most brain healthy foods that have ever been discovered. Now, some dense sources of sphingolipids are going to be found in foods like eggs, butter, yogurt, cream, and then surprisingly, foods like sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are a really good source of sphingolipids, and rice is a good source of sphingolipids. And in the conversation of rice, we actually break down rice to the nth degree in Eat Smarter and talk about all things in that spectrum, from white rice to brown rice, and that whole battle that's been going on for decades now. And what's the truth? What's going on with rice? Rice, baby. That's what we talk about in Eat Smart as well. But just know that there's a certain way to cook these foods, and they've been utilized literally for thousands of years. All right, so there's something there. There's a reason behind it that many societies have subsisted on foods like rice and sweet potatoes as well. So we mentioned with sphingolipids, we've got, again, eggs, butter, yogurt, cream, rice, sweet potatoes. Those are some really good sources of sphingolipids. Now, this is where things get really, really cool, really interesting. One of the most dominant sphingolipids is something called sphingomyelin. Sphingomyelin. Now, these molecules serve as signaling molecules that hold important roles in neuronal differentiation, so making sure that our brain cells are becoming what they need to become, synaptogenesis, so the creation of these synaptic pathways, which is how our brain cells are communicating and connecting, and many other roles as well. Now, this sphingomyelin, if you hear there's a part of the word here, myelin, this is very, very important. We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but one of the most dominant sphingolipids is called sphingomyelin. Very, very important. Now, sphingomyelins interact with the third of our three major types of fats or lipids that the brain is made of. They interact with these specific category of fats. Sphingomyelins interact with these specific category of lipids to perform a myriad of functions in the brain. And this third category is cholesterol. The brain actually contains the highest concentration of cholesterol in our bodies, right? The brain contains about 20% of our entire body's cholesterol. Now, the human brain is only about 2% of our body's mass, but it consumes upwards of about 25% of the caloric intake that we bring in. It is very, very hungry organ, and it's also very hungry for cholesterol. Now, here's the rub, because the cholesterol that's located in the human brain is primarily made on demand by our brain cells themselves. All right, it's made on demand within the brain. Our brain cells can make it. It is that vital and that important. But as you know, cholesterol is one of those dirty words. It's a dirty word. It's a bad word in our culture. When there's no context, there's no nuance. We just believe that this thing is bad for you, leads to heart disease. And recently we broke this down with one of the foremost experts in the world in this subject matter, Dr. Johnny Bowden, and we'll put that episode for you in the show notes. It's really a masterclass on all things cholesterol. So just understand that cholesterol is one of the most important nutrients for the human body. Not to say that there isn't situations where cholesterol can be problematic, absolutely. But for the most part, it's really been shifted so much without any context, without any nuance, and without any education on how important cholesterol is. Because cholesterol, for example, is literally, it's a precursor to making our sex hormones. All right. If we don't have cholesterol, you're not going to do it. All right. We need it. But our sex hormones are not just for sex. They're just the overarching umbrella label. All right. Our sex hormones are for so many other aspects of our vitality. All right. Cholesterol is critical in that. Cholesterol is critical in the synthesis of vitamin D, turning sunlight into usable forms of vitamin D. We have to have that. Vitamin D plays multiple roles in our immune system function, anti-cancer applications, many different roles in growth and development, the health of our brain, the health of our reproductive system, the health of our heart. The list goes on and on and on. And we did a master class on vitamin D as well. So make sure to check out that episode too. But please understand, these are just some of the roles, total body roles that cholesterol plays. But within the brain itself, it is so critical that the brain is constantly making this powerful substance. Now, these sphingomyelins combine and interact with cholesterol to make our myelin. And myelin is the fatty sheath coating around our nerve axons that literally facilitate these electrical impulse conductions from cell to cell. All right. So what that really means is myelin getting laid down over these brain cells, the connectivity of our brain cells helps to insulate conductivity and basically providing an accelerated speed of electrical transmission, a speed of electrical impulses. So the more myelin that's getting laid down, we'll just take, for example, how does this play out in our day-to-day lives? This activity of myelin and its insulation and being able to speed up electrical impulses within our brain and our nervous system. What does that look like? Well, this, for example, takes place. There's more myelin getting laid down when you're taking your first steps, to where, a child is taking their first steps to where they're very proficient in walking, to where walking is automatic. You can walk, talk, listen to music, listen to podcasts, dance. You could do all kinds of stuff while walking. You don't have to think about it anymore. It's automatic. It's firing continuously, smoothly, because of that insulation being laid down by myelin. It makes things automatic. And here's a big key. When it comes to something like sports performance, for example, and you think about all of the practice shots that someone like Steph Curry is taking, right, to lay this pathway down, this automation of these nerves firing to where you can do it at the drop of a hat, anytime, anywhere, all kinds of funky, crazy positions, that pattern, that motor unit, that conductivity, all of those things are firing together, interacting with speed, because this is the big takeaway, is that it's not practice makes perfect. It's practice makes permanent. And it makes permanent because it's laying down more myelin. All right, that's how powerful this is. So all of this stuff in a practical application, cholesterol and sphingomyelin, we need these to be able to create this insulation for this conductivity of our cells firing in these different processes, these different patterns. This is what makes us more efficient, more effective, faster. And this is one of the things that's, again, often looked over in the communication about cognitive well-being and performance, is what is our brain actually made of, and what can we do to fortify and to support this process? So my question was, when I first learned about this and being able to work with some of the most incredible neuroscientists in the world, Dr. Lisa Mosconi, Dr. Wendy Suzuki. I just did a guest lecture for her neuroscience class at NYU, and having these incredible conversations and insights, my question is, okay, if the brain is making cholesterol, how's it doing it? What's going on? What are there specialized cells that are doing this? And the answer is absolutely. It is believed that certain cells in the brain called astrocytes. We already talked about the analogy with the brain and the universe, but astrocytes produce most of our brain's cholesterol. Now, these star-shaped cells of the central nervous system are a subtype of glial cells, right? Astrocytes actually outnumber our neurons. Okay, so we got glial cells and we've got neurons. Our astrocytes actually outnumber our neurons by over 5-fold in the brain. There's so many more of these star-shaped cells. In humans, a single astrocyte cell can interact with up to 2 million synapses at the same time. It's like these incredible little orbits, these little galaxies operating with each and every one of these astrocytes. Again, the human brain is so absolutely incredible, but there's a tremendous amount of cholesterol that is synthesized within the brain with our astrocytes, but also there's some dietary implications here as well, but in particular, when we are a baby, all right, when we're developing. Now, this isn't often talked about, but the things that have been demonized in our culture so much the last few decades, and thankfully a lot of really solid science is coming forward, things that have been villainized, like saturated fat, for example, like cholesterol, without any nuance or context. These are some of the most important fundamental things for making up the human body, the human brain. Mother's milk, human breast milk, can be upwards of even 50% saturated fat, 30 to 50% saturated fat. Why would nature do that if saturated fat's gonna kill you? It doesn't make any sense. And it's because it's blatantly wrong. But this is not to say that certain types of dietary saturated fats can't be problematic. But we have to have a little bit more of a meta perspective, a little bit more nuance, and also understanding, where are our fats coming from? Are they coming from real whole foods, or are they coming from highly refined processed foods? The brain itself does not feel pain. And this is because the brain does not have nociceptors. These are pain receptors to actually indicate and express pain within the brain itself. Now, again, your brain can tell you about pain elsewhere. Now, pain, if we really think about it, is an important part of our survival and our functionality as human beings, because pain really indicates that something is wrong. It gives us feedback that something is wrong. I don't like this. If you accidentally touch something hot, you touch a hot stove or a hot iron, and you jump back really quickly, that pain indication, your body's telling you that this thing could melt you. You're going to get your wicked witch on. You're going to get melted if you don't back away. All right, it's giving us indication that this thing is harming us. And if we think about maybe stubbing our toe, for example, rummaging around in the night and you stub your toe, that pain is giving you feedback that you need to be more careful. That's something that doesn't feel good. It's potentially injurious, and it's going to create a heightened state of inflammation. But we're registering that pain response, even though it happened in our toe, our brain is picking it up and giving us this overall data. All right, so the same thing in the internal intrusion experience of pain. Maybe you think about something like heartburn, for example, right? This heartburn is giving you an indication. Listen, Shawn, you probably shouldn't have ate that chili and cheese nacho from 7-Eleven. If you got to go to a pump and pump the chili out with a pump machine, chili from a pump is probably not the best thing for you. And I'm going to express this Gargamel level heartburn for you, make it feel the cauldron bubble, so that you make a decision other than pumping your chili, your meat, from a tube. All right. So these are things that we might do on a day-to-day basis. But the thing is, too, we can ignore the pain. We can ignore the pain. We can get that pain feedback and keep doing the behavior. But what's going to happen is our bodies are going to express pain in different and creative ways to try to get us to pay attention. But it's all going to get regulated by that incredible master station upstairs in the brain. But again, the brain itself does not have nociceptors. And these nociceptors are the receptors, these nerve receptors that actually indicate and experience pain. And you might have seen videos, for example, of surgeries taking place where somebody's having a brain surgery while they're awake and coherent. And they're literally getting their brain operated on at the same time. And partly this is because, again, the brain itself does not feel pain. Now, just to be clear, something might come up for us that, well, what about headaches? What about migraines? And we might even experience a sensation of pressure or pain deep inside of our head, inside of our skull. But what that really is just our perception of where the pain is coming from. And that's what it's really about. The brain interprets pain signals sent to it, but it does not, again, feel pain itself. It interprets it. And that perception of pain can be a little bit misconstrued. All right. Now, this is one of the strange facts about the human brain. This is one of the strange facts about this incredible organ. Theoretical physicist Michio Kaku said the human brain is the most complicated object in the known universe. That is a major statement for somebody to make a statement like that. Somebody of his caliber to say something like that. And one of the complicated things about it is that The brain can tell you about pain elsewhere, but the brain feels no pain itself. All right, so that's number one of our 10 strange but powerful facts about the human brain. Now we're going to move on to number two. And number two is that your brain grows 3 times its size during your first year of life. The human brain expresses rapid development in that first year in overall functionality, but also in the sheer size of growth. And this might be indicative of babies having a little bit of difficulty trying to balance themselves, getting it together just to walk, because we might have that big sucker on top of our shoulders. We got a little tiny body, and the babies, our head could be a little bit bigger, and it can get things a little bit off until our bodies kind of catch up and are better able to balance our bodies and our muscles as well. So this is for a reason. The human brain, and if you look at other species of mammals, for example, we come out pretty vulnerable. We do a lot of our development outside of the womb, whereas other animals in nature, many of them, they got to get up and get right to it. If you've ever seen a giraffe birth, for example, and the giraffe, they're already tall, they're already up there, and they drop the baby out. Already you're getting here, literally dropped off. You're entering life with a bang. And you got to get up and get busy because there's predators around. And you got to get up and learn how to walk relatively quickly. Whereas humans, we are very vulnerable, and we're nurtured. We require that human connection for our development. We require a lot of human support and guidance for us to develop. But this speaks to the overall capacity, how much is going on with the human brain. That's where really all the magic is really happening, because there's a lot of transformation taking place and laying down pathways for new functions and memory. It's just like rapid fire when we first get here. So, and a part of that, again, is the growth of the overall size of the brain itself. And a big part of that, obviously, is going to be thanks to the nutrition that we're bringing in, giving our brains the raw materials that it needs to grow itself. If we're deficient on the things that the brain is made of, we're not going to get that growth. We need it. And unbeknownst to most people, if we're looking at the primary food, the thing that we know for certain that humans are designed to consume, is human breast milk. When we get here, that is true human food. And if we look at the construct of what is coming along in breast milk, we start to understand what a major role it plays in the development of our brains. And human breast milk is actually significantly rich in saturated fat, right? Saturated fat, upwards of 30, even in some instances, it could be upwards of 50% saturated fat. And this word has been really vilified in our culture and in our media. And the question is, why would saturated fat be so bad for us if it was literally one of the primary foods for human beings when we get here? How does that even make sense? It just doesn't. It's taking nutrition and putting it into this very black and white, this dichotomy, polarization, and making it good, bad, versus all of the gray area in between when we're looking at fats like saturated fat, because the human brain itself, saturated fats are an important commodity. So much so that human breast milk, again, is very rich in saturated fats. Another thing that human breast milk is rich in, unbeknownst to most people, is cholesterol. The human brain itself has the highest concentration of cholesterol versus anywhere else in the body. Cholesterol is more concentrated in the human brain than anywhere else. About 20% of your whole body cholesterol is located in that amazing brain of yours. And about 80% of that cholesterol is located within the myelin sheath of the human brain. One of the primary roles of our myelin is to act as an insulator for nerve conduction, for nerve transmission, for behaviors, for signaling to fire faster and faster as we're laying down more and more myelin. So if we're talking about a baby taking their first steps, How do we get from there to being able to walk effortlessly, to being able to walk and talk, to being able to walk and listen to music at the same time, or being able to walk and chew gum, all right, at the same time? How could we start to outsource the walking to just automation and be able to do other things, because it's such a pattern that's been laid down? It's thanks in large part to the development of more myelin. All right, so that's where we see that repetitive behavior that we might do is helping to lay down more and more myelin. And if we understand the role that cholesterol plays in the development of myelin, we start to, again, have a better respect, a more vast understanding of cholesterol than this very black and white statement that cholesterol is bad for you, or that there is even such thing as, quote, bad cholesterol. When LDL itself, for example, it's not cholesterol. I didn't say cholesterol when I say low density lipoprotein. It's a carrier for cholesterol. And LDL, you would die without it. You need LDL. It's helping to deliver cholesterol various places that it needs to go in the body. Then we get into the conversation about particle size, and we get into the conversation about oxidation of these cholesterol carriers. Some of the real culprits here, if we're talking about the relationship between cholesterol and heart disease. And we talked about that recently on a masterclass episode with one of the foremost experts in the world on the topic of cholesterol, Dr. Johnny Bowden. So make sure to check out that episode as well. But another really important facet of this cholesterol conversation and the growth of babies' brains that, again, grows 3 times its size during that first year. If we're lacking on this input with cholesterol, for example, a tremendous amount of cholesterol is synthesized in the brain within the first few weeks of birth. And disruptions to this process can lead to neurodegenerative disorders. All right, so this is helping to fortify the brain for a lifetime potentially. And we got to really start to investigate and ask questions. Are we getting the same benefits if we're looking at infant formula versus human breast milk? And what are some of the solutions there? Because we need to have adequate amounts of these things that are often not considered. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that breastfed babies tend to have healthier levels of blood cholesterol later in life. So the researchers uncovered that having abnormal, or what they consider to be dangerous levels of cholesterol, that potential, that risk goes up when the child is formula fed versus breastfed. The researchers believe that the reason breastfeeding may result in lower cholesterol is that the high cholesterol content of human breast milk may exert physiological changes that influence cholesterol synthesis. So that input, that influx of cholesterol from breast milk helps the body to actually be able to process and utilize cholesterol properly. Not just then, but later in life. It's powerful stuff, powerful insights. So again, number 2 on our list of these 10 strange but true facts about the human brain is that during our first year of life, our brains grow 3 times their size. All right, now we're going to move on to number 3 on our list. And number 3 of these strange facts is that our brain eats most of our energy. The human brain actually consumes the greatest proportion of our caloric intake, our energy intake, versus anywhere else in the body. Now, the crazy thing is that our brain actually only takes up about 2% of our body's overall mass, but it consumes 20 to upwards of 25% of our caloric intake. It is a hungry organ, and it's constantly consuming energy. A big part of that we've talked about recently in a masterclass, really looking at what the brain itself is made of. And we dove in deeper on the 3 different types of fat that the brain is made of. So make sure to check that episode out, because we mentioned cholesterol. We also, in that episode, talk about Sphingolipids, and we also talked about phospholipids and so much more. So make sure to check that episode out as well. But here's the crazy thing. The human brain, a big reason it's driving and siphoning all that energy, it isn't just the brain itself, but it's also the brain security system, the blood-brain barrier, which is abundant in mitochondria. And mitochondria are well noted to be these energy power plants in our cells that kick off a lot of energy, but they require a lot of energy as well. So that's one of the big theories around why the brain is utilizing so much energy and calling for so much energy is the protection of the brain itself, not to mention all of the trillions of processes that's happening in the brain every second. It needs energy for all of it to work. All right, so your brain, even though it's only 2% of your body's mass, it is consuming the majority of your energy. So that's the third of our strange facts about the human brain. Now, to take this a step further, and number 4 on our list, yes, our brain consumes the majority of our energy versus anywhere else in our bodies, but your brain has its own selective diet. Even though your brain consumes most of your energy, it's also a very picky eater. Not everything you consume, not every nutrient is allowed to make its way into the VIP section of your body, which is located upstairs in that amazing brain of yours. Again, we have the blood-brain barrier, which is a protective force that helps to ensure that only the right stuff with the right certification, with the right pass, is able to make its way, that make sure that they're on the list to get up into the brain's VIP section. All right, and also the elimination of things like what's coming out of the brain. We've got this dual action function with the blood-brain barrier. All right, very, very powerful. And again, we talked about that more in depth on that episode, looking at what the brain is really made of. All right, so the blood-brain barrier is determining what's going to make its way into our brain. Now, the diet that the brain has, being that it's a picky eater, we like to call it neuro nutrition. We have whole body nutrition. We have nutrition that is preferentially used by our fat cells, by our joints, by our liver. The list goes on and on. But your brain is the most picky eater of all. The blood-brain barrier really acts sort of like a helicopter parent, or a parent who's really spoiling the kid right there front line. You know, the brain is like, no, I don't like that. I don't want to eat that. And the blood-brain barrier is like, it's okay. You know, we'll just get you what you want. And it's always looking out, trying to make sure that the brain is happy and really paying attention to what's making its way in there. Now, the most abundant openings or gates that the blood-brain barrier has to allow into the brain itself is going to be gates for certain types of fats, structural fats. It's going to be gates for certain types of minerals like magnesium. It's going to be gates for glucose. It's going to be gates for certain gases like oxygen. It's going to be gates for water. But there's very specific nutrients, again, that are able to make their way into the brain. Now, a problem that can take place is that that protective parent can get damaged. It can get overburdened and start to lose function, where things that are nefarious are starting to make their way into the brain itself. All right, so the degradation of the blood-brain barrier is a massive issue today. So whether it's from toxicants from our environment, like pesticides, well noted to damage and disrupt the blood-brain barrier function. Alcohol can be very detrimental to the blood-brain barrier. Alcohol is one of those things that also has express pass gates to get into the brain. Also, excessive amounts of sugar can degrade and decay, break down the blood-brain barrier as well. So we have to be mindful of this and support the blood-brain barrier to protect the brain and make sure that the brain is able to access the most healthy diet possible. Now, one of the things that's been confirmed in the research to actually help to regenerate and protect and heal the blood-brain barrier, funny enough, this was uncovered by researchers at Auburn University. They uncovered that extra virgin olive oil, oleocanthal-rich extra virgin olive oil, is able to repair and support the blood-brain barrier. This highlights yet again the important necessity for high-quality fats to literally create the tissues of our bodies, including the tissues that protect our brain itself. So what the researchers indicated was somewhere in the ballpark of 2 to 4 tablespoons a day can really have some great supportive effects for our brain and nervous system and many other health aspects as well. So that's one piece of it. But also, we got to understand that as we get older, as we age, as I mentioned before, the brain is just siphoning and pulling up in our early years, in particular that first year of life, cholesterol and saturated fat. But those gates start to kind of close up shop a little bit, and it becomes a lot less needed, or less able to access and get into the brain as we get older. In fact, the brain can make its own cholesterol, and the particular area of the brain or the parts of the brain that are making cholesterol for the brain itself on demand are our astrocytes, right? Astrocytes. But through our diet, those gates start to essentially go down. But still, cholesterol is so important that the brain can make it itself. Now, recently, just within the last decade or so, a lot of folks have been able to have a new relationship with chocolate and start to understand the root of where chocolate comes from. Because growing up, we just saw it as candy, right? It's just like Three Musketeers, Mars, Butterfinger, Twix, whatever. It's got the chocolate coating, or a Hershey's bar, right? So we've got chocolate candy. And we don't know where it comes from. We just think it's just chocolate. It's just made up. But chocolate actually comes from a powerful root. It comes from the root of cacao, right? So this, botanically, it's a pod that when you cut it open, there are a bunch of seeds within it that is covered with fruit. It's a fruit covering, but within it are what we call these chocolate beans, right? So the cacao beans are inside, covered by fruit. But again, you've got to see the YouTube video on this one. When you cut the pod open and you see that plethora of fruit-covered seeds within the cacao pod, it looks damn close to some teeth. It looks like that cacao pod is smiling at you, and it is super weird, all right? Chocolate and its root cacao is beneficial for our teeth. All right, now listen to this. A study conducted by researchers from the Department of Pediatric Dentistry at the University of Naples in Italy found that the polyphenols in chocolate have anti-cariogenic, aka anti-cavity effects. Specifically, the researchers found that chocolate polyphenols significantly reduce biofilm formation and acid production that is detrimental to our teeth. All right, again, you've got to see the video on this one to see how much it resembles teeth. It's really weird. Now, theobromine, specifically, and this is an alkaloid found in chocolate, is also well noted to have benefits for the cardiovascular system, but it also appears to have benefits for our teeth. A study published in the Dental Research Journal revealed that the theobromine in chocolate-based non-fluoride toothpaste outperformed two commercial fluoride toothpastes, including Kids Colgate, in defending against cavity-associated microbe activity. That's bananas. Brushing your teeth with chocolate compounds? Who knew? Who knew? Outperformed fluoride toothpaste, including Kids Colgate, which again comes along with a plethora of whatever. So understanding this compound, theobromine, but let me share this actually with you. This is a little fun fact. The compound theobromine is derived from the cacao tree itself. The name of the cacao tree, that's where the compound theobromine, this alkaloid, gets its name. The scientific name of the cacao tree itself is Theobroma cacao, right? Thus theobromine, but Theobroma cacao, which means food of the gods in Greek. Now let that dance around in your mental dance floor for a little bit. All right, shout out to Kevin Bacon, shout out to Footloose. The food of the gods, really, really cool. Now, overall, the tannins, polyphenols, and flavonoids found in dark chocolate and its origins, cacao, are protective of our teeth. Chocolate also contains a plethora of nutrients that are needed for healthy teeth and gums, like calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Again, mountains of peer-reviewed evidence demonstrate the benefits that high-quality chocolate have on things like cardiovascular health and brain health. And we've talked about this several times here on the Model Health Show. But its benefits for our teeth are another way that chocolate can put a smile on your face. Now, this really leans into the importance of the quality and source of chocolate. All right, this matters so much. when we're talking about these benefits, we're not talking about jamming down some Twix. We're not talking about jamming down, a Hershey's bar. We're talking about getting closer to the root of chocolate, the high quality chocolate, the root of cacao. So there are wonderful companies now that are making dark chocolate bars that aren't including a tremendous amount of heavily refined sugar and just going overboard in the process, the extraction process, the processing of the chocolate, to keeping it closer to its roots so that it has more bioavailable nutrients. So that's one aspect of it for sure. So we've got, of course, cacao powder that you can use for smoothies. There's cacao nibs. You can get the little pieces of the chocolate beans and add them to different dishes as well, toss them into smoothies and things like that too. So it's upgrading the sourcing of the chocolate. By the way, traditionally, if we're talking about, ancient civilizations, like the Aztecs, like the Mayans, chocolate was actually used as a form of currency. All right. What? All right. Forget Bitcoin. If you want to get like a new sweater, you'd be like, here's, 17 chocolate beans. Let me get that, instead of the Gucci, it's the, Aztec Gucci. I don't know. But you go and you buy your clothes and your food and, your livelihood, you'd use those chocolate beans. All right. It was this valuable for them to utilize this. And they were rich with, sources of gold and things of that nature. But, one of the rulers, he had like a vault full of, and I picture it like Scrooge McDuck, just full of these chocolate beans and diving in and going swimming in the chocolate beans. But this is how valuable it's been for cultures of the past, because they knew something remarkable about this food. But oftentimes, if we're talking about combining it with things, it wasn't necessarily the chocolate combined with the sweet is a newer invention, because there's some evidence that the traditional hot chocolate drink was really something that was more spicy. All right. And so leaning into that a little bit, how about using chocolate in some savory dishes? There's a great chocolate chili recipe. All right. You could toss a little bit of cacao powder into your next chili. All right. Maybe with some kidney beans in the chili. We start stacking it. All right. That's what it's all about. But one of the most common ways and the easiest on-ramp for folks is making a chocolate smoothie, but upgrading those ingredients. So when we're talking about high quality protein powder that has a high quality source of cacao in there too, high quality cocoa, it just is going to up level and extract some of these benefits that, again, it's not just good for our cardiovascular system, our brain, but also noticeably for our teeth, surprisingly. The next one of our powerful foods that resemble the human body part, that we now have peer-reviewed evidence on its benefit, is walnuts and the human brain. All right, now again, make sure to check out the YouTube version, because it is uncanny how much a walnut looks like the brain. Now, strikingly, compounds found in walnuts have been shown to be remarkable in their effects on the human brain. Notably, compounds in walnuts have been shown to help scrub your brain clear of the harmful amyloid beta peptide that leads to bona fide amyloid plaque buildup in the brain. And this amyloid plaque buildup is associated with dementia and Alzheimer's and more. And walnuts have some protective benefits here. The data highlighted in the journal Neurochemical Research demonstrates that walnuts have the potential to reduce oxidative stress, reduce inflammation, and protect your brain cells from an early demise. Walnuts are packed with brain-healthy vitamins, minerals, and fats. And recent research from UCLA suggests that eating a handful of walnuts per day may actually help to boost memory. The researchers found that walnuts appear to have benefits on improving memory, concentration, and the speed at which your brain processes information. Again, it's not just the structure of the brain and being protective of that, but also the functionality and that playing out in the real world with improved memory. Walnuts compact in their very own hard shell, like your cranium, for example. And again, it's another little bit of a, that's really interesting. That's an interesting coincidence. And without special equipment, it can be a really hard nut to crack. Now, also in that same lane of functionality and that whole body benefit, walnuts have been found to interact with the brain and other organs to coordinate the release of certain satiety hormones. So these hormones that help us to feel satisfied, to experience a sense of fullness and not be experiencing ravenous hunger, right? So these nuts, including walnuts, are a great category of foods that have really great benefits on our satiety hormones. But notably here in this context, walnuts. So not only do they look like the brain, they have beneficial impact on our brain cells as well. So with this, walnuts, again, super easy to use. You can snack on walnuts. We can add some to a smoothie. You can get yourself some walnut butter. Easy to add to trail mix, salads. You can obviously use them in a variety of culinary dishes. This is something simple to add to, snacks. So sprinkling on some yogurt, gluten-free oats, or whatever you're into. Walnuts, easy add-in, but the question is, are you using them because your brain really seems to like them? All right, we're gonna move on. We're at number 7 on our list of these 11 powerful foods that surprisingly resemble the organs in the human body that they have benefit for, clinically proven benefit. All right, now this next one is, we tend to think of our lungs simply as these air-filled sacs in our chest, right? We got these sacs in our chest, but there's a lot more than air going on in there. Within the lungs, helping to make the breathing magic happen are the bronchi, which strikingly resemble the larger stems of broccoli. The bronchioles, which mimic the way broccoli has smaller branches springing off from the large main branch, and the alveoli, which are the tiny air sacs at the end of the bronchioles that resemble the buds from the flowering head of the broccoli. Again, you've got to see the YouTube version to see just how similar broccoli looks to the inner workings of the lungs. Now, the lungs are incredibly complex and powerful. Take the alveoli, for example. These tiny buds are where the lungs and the blood exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide during the process of breathing in and breathing out. That's some seriously powerful activity happening in those tiny little buds. Now, they're tiny, but they are incredibly mighty in their performance. Now, how does the broccoli and lung health connection play out in the real world? Because again, once you see this similarity in their appearance, it's really, really crazy and cool, but how does this play out? Well, researchers at Johns Hopkins University found that sulforaphane, a plant chemical that is made by broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables, helps to restore the immune system pathways within the lungs that clean out harmful pathogens and reduce the risk of infections. Researchers at UCLA also noted the potent ability of sulforaphane to reduce inflammation, specifically in the lungs. Another study, and this was featured in the journal BMC Cancer, revealed some remarkable benefits in reducing lung cancer risk in smokers and former smokers. The researchers found that the isothiocyanates that are uniquely found in broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables have a cancer modulating effect that defends the lungs against smoking-related damage. They noted that the isothiocyanates modulate carcinogen metabolism and facilitate carcinogen detoxification. That's really, really powerful. Now, circling back to the anti-inflammatory effects that broccoli compounds have on the lungs, I was shocked by how many peer-reviewed papers have come out recently analyzing the benefits that these broccoli compounds can have against COVID-19. I couldn't believe it. Like, who thinks of that? But I love it because this is the world that we live in right now. Yes, there's a lot of nonsense. Yes, a lot in medicine has been barking up the wrong tree. But there's so many folks now who are aware of the remarkable benefits and compounds that are found in foods that have just amazing benefits in the human body. Whereas food has largely been brushed off to the side in its importance in medicine, and negating the fact that our tissues are literally made from food. And we're trying to adjust and treat tissues with these external synthetic treatments, right? These newly invented treatments, not understanding that our tissues themselves are made from the things that we eat. So, does food matter? Of course it matters. And now many researchers have really put this top of mind and they're looking at things like this because, again, I was shocked. I couldn't believe how many studies were looking at these broccoli compounds and their relationship with COVID-19. Now, check this out. A report published in Trends in Pharmacological Sciences highlighted how sulforaphane acts upon the defensive pathways used by the lungs and other tissues that combat excessive inflammation triggered by COVID-19. Aha! Another study published in the World Allergy Organization journal titled Efficacy of Broccoli and Glucoraphanin in COVID-19. A paper, again, looking at broccoli and COVID-19. Who knew? Who thought of this? All right, so the title of the paper again was Efficacy of Broccoli and Glucoraphanin in COVID-19, from Hypothesis to Proof of Concept, with 3 experimental clinical cases. All right, so that's the title of the paper. And this paper analyzed several studies employing broccoli compounds in relationship to COVID-19. In one study, the scientists detailed that capsules of broccoli seeds containing glucoraphanin. So this is another one of these compounds that are abundant in broccoli. And they found that consuming these capsules of broccoli seeds containing glucoraphanin being taken before the onset of SARS-CoV-2 infection and were continued daily for over a month after the first COVID-19 symptoms. So they started taking them before, got the infection, and continued taking them. And the researchers stated that this intervention, consuming these broccoli concentrates, was found to reduce many of the symptoms of COVID-19 rapidly. Another aspect of the study found that the intervention led to a reduction in severity of cytokine storms. Now, I'll tell you, this doesn't sound real. Like broccoli versus COVID, it doesn't sound real. It doesn't, all right? Because our paradigm is such that, we're looking for a new drug, some kind of like science has to come together and we find this thing, and this doesn't fit into that paradigm. But the data exists, all right? It's really interesting. It's not saying that this is some curative agent, some magic end-all be-all, but there are some notable compounds in here that are helping to reduce inflammation and helping to reduce the severity of symptoms. So we should definitely acknowledge that. And this is why, again, there's multiple papers looking at this. And I was going to say, this is why we need to investigate this further. Because if this is beneficial here, what else can it be beneficial for? Now, the most concentrated form of these compounds, as kind of highlighted a little bit in that last study I mentioned, are the nutrients found not just in the broccoli itself, but in broccoli sprouts, which echoes the advice from Harvard researcher and founder of the Angiogenesis Society, Dr. William Li, who was on the Model Health Show several times and on recently to talk about COVID-19. And he's got some incredible insights very early on in this, and being able to get lung tissue from a cadaver and see the interaction that COVID-19 has on lung tissue, and finding that this is much more related to the capillary function, the endothelium, than what most folks realize. So this being more of a circulatory issue, not just this strictly respiratory condition. So really powerful stuff. We'll put that episode with Dr. William Li for you in the show notes. But he talked about on the show how powerful broccoli sprouts can be as a preventative and supportive agent in relationship to this infectious disease that's on everybody's minds. So really cool stuff there. Broccoli resembles the inner workings of our lungs. And just so happens there's a tremendous amount of peer-reviewed evidence showing that broccoli does, in fact, have benefits, substantial benefits for our lungs. So same tenet here. If we can get organic broccoli, all good. We can get fresh broccoli. Frozen broccoli is a super easy thing to always have on hand in the freezer. Combining broccoli with some high quality fats is going to, because there's going to be fat soluble nutrients in the broccoli as well. So, obviously broccoli is kind of a standalone thing, but broccoli, funny enough, can also be added. Some people add broccoli to, different soups and smoothies and things like that as well. I'm not saying to do that. I'm not saying that's delicious, but some folks do. But the broccoli sprouts, one of my mother-in-law's, one of my greatest teachers and mentors, she would put the broccoli sprouts right on top of the salad, looking like a whole bunch of Albert Einstein's hair on top of her salad, right? And then she'd tear that up. And then, so that got me interested in the sprout. So I got into the sprout life. So shout out to Mama Mukami. I appreciate you immensely, always. All right, so broccoli sprouts, broccoli added in. All right, we're gonna move on here. We're up to 8 here on our list of foods that resemble the human body, different parts of the human body. And this one is looking at something that resembles directly human blood. I don't think there's any natural, whole, real food that resembles blood more than beets. All right, beets. If you've ever seen a beet juiced or juice a beet yourself, it comes gushing out like a scene from Blade 3. All right, Blade 3, apparently, the progression of the Blade movies went downhill, but I like Blade 3. It's had Ryan Reynolds in it. It was great. I thought it was good. But shout out to Wesley Snipes. And it's coming. They're redoing it now as well. The Marvel Universe is bringing Blade into the thing. Arguably, Blade kicked off the new Marvel paradigm and gave them a lift to do what they're doing today, because Marvel at the time, they were selling off their rights and their properties, their characters left and right to try to stay afloat. But so, big shout out to Blade and to Wesley Snipes. Anyways, blood, back to blood. If anybody's like, what is Blade? He's a vampire. Okay. So beets and blood. Now, obviously the blood is also referred to as the river of life within our tissues. And it's transporting nutrients and oxygen everywhere that it needs to go to fuel, to provide nutrients to everything from our eyes to our spine to our toes. Thank you, blood, this river of life in our tissues, for doing the incredible job that it does. Now, how do beets, which again look like more than any other whole food, blood? It's kind of creepy, but how does this play out to benefiting our blood? Well, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial analyzed the effects of beet juice on blood pressure and endothelial function of older adults. At the end of the 4-week study, the results demonstrated that the participants receiving beet juice had significant improvements in blood pressure and improvements in large vessel endothelial function. Now, circling back to a little bit of the science we talked about with COVID-19, the damage to our endothelial function that takes place with that, our body's response, these cytokine storms, our response to interacting with this particular virus, a lot of the damage is being done to our endothelium. And so seeing that beet juice, again, of all things, has benefits in supporting endothelial function and also improving blood pressure. Now, a tremendous amount of cholesterol is actually synthesized in the brain within the first few weeks of birth. And disruptions to this process have been well documented to lead to neurodegenerative diseases. So if this process is inhibited, with cholesterol being able to make its way into the brain, also the brain to be able to start to produce it itself, again, based on the building blocks that we give our children, This can set us up for a lifetime of problems and accelerated aging of the brain and abnormal development of the brain. So this is pretty important stuff. Now, cholesterol also plays a key role in neuronal differentiation, right? So cells becoming the right stuff that they're supposed to become, and also cellular plasticity in the brain. All right. So the brain cells being able to adapt and to conform to different situations, environmental inputs, to be able to get jobs done and to adapt. Cholesterol also plays an important role, and this is very, very, very important if we're thinking about something like a traumatic brain injury, but cholesterol plays an important role in nerve regeneration after injury. So this is yet another spot that cholesterol might be coming to the rescue, but it's just considered to be the bad guy if we're talking about heart disease, for example. And it's just like there's a situation going on. We find cholesterol here. They must have lit the fire, but maybe the cholesterol is the fireman. Who knows? There's got to be some nuance. But in this context, make sure to check out that episode with Dr. Johnny Bowden. Incredibly eye-opening. But in this context, cholesterol plays an important role in nerve regeneration. So helping to build back those nerves and get things back online again. Very important. Now, with that said, and this being such a threat in our world today, if we're talking about cholesterol and heart disease, which one of the studies that we mentioned in that episode was a major, huge meta-analysis that was conducted. And it was revealed that about 75% of the people that are hospitalized with a cardiac event, with a heart attack, for example, the vast majority of those people didn't even have high cholesterol. And as a matter of fact, that cholesterol number, what's considered high, has been ratcheting down lower and lower and lower, putting more people above that threshold. And so still 75% of the people hospitalized with a cardiac event didn't even have high cholesterol. So how is it the causative agent for heart disease? Like, there's already a big conflict in that hypothesis. Again, it's not to say that cholesterol can't be problematic, but the overarching black and white, the Michael Jackson version of this is good, this is bad, cholesterol, this is good cholesterol, this is bad cholesterol, is completely ignoring the complexity of the human body and the human brain. With it being such a big player in what's believed to be the major villain in cardiac events and heart disease, this is driving a statin industry, the pharmaceutical industry, that's creating about $30 billion a year in revenue for pharmaceutical companies with statin drugs. They've been raking it. Like, get the rake out. They're just raking it in. They're racking it up. But what's the underlying issue here? If we're targeting something to reduce cholesterol, what is the impact if your body needs cholesterol for so many different processes? Are the statins selectively targeting the right thing? Well, multiple reports now, and there are several meta-analysis on this, but multiple reports of significant short-term memory loss has been associated with statin drug use, prompting the FDA to actually put a warning on this drug class because of it. We just talked about how important cholesterol is for the human brain. It has roles in helping to facilitate and build our myelin. It has roles in memory as well, focus, attention, all those things. There's actually been, by the FDA, they put a warning. Hey, you might experience some short-term memory loss. We don't know. Look away. But also, we've got to be able to ask ourselves, in taking this statin and understanding the multiple roles that cholesterol plays in the human body, what other, quote, side effects might be taking place? Because again, we're looking at taking a synthetic drug, a synthetic chemical, to have an isolated effect on cholesterol. But it will inherently affect every other cell in our bodies because it's all taking place within our body. It's not a side effect. These are direct effects. And one of the things that's been noted for years now, when I was running my clinical practice, I had people, this is over a decade ago, I had reports, I'm showing people as they're coming in, they're on their statins and they're on lisinopril and they're on metformin and they're on all these different drugs. And I'm just helping them to get educated, even about drug interactions that their physician oftentimes isn't even, this person isn't talking to that person. The cardiologist isn't talking to the immunologist oftentimes. And so looking at the drug interactions, for example, but one of the things that was noted, well documented right at this point, and it's crazy that I'm still talking about this and this hasn't been changed, but there's a significant increased incidence when someone is on a statin of developing diabetes, of developing insulin resistance, which is one of the most detrimental, damaging, deadly things for our brain and our cognitive ability. Because right now, Alzheimer's is actually being reclassified. The name is type 3 diabetes. There's an insulin resistance taking place in our brain. The human brain is an absolute sponge for sugar, for glucose. But through our evolution, we didn't get it that often. So whenever it comes in, the brain is like, I got this. Let me get that. And your brain will gladly confiscate about 50% of the glucose that comes in, the sugar that you take in, the carbohydrates that you take in a meal. Your brain will gladly confiscate half of that. Now just imagine the amount of sugar that can be flooded into the human brain today with the way that we eat. You know, if I think about growing up and, you know, me getting my penny candy, heading to the corner store with $1, you're rich. Where I'm from, you get 100 pieces of candy, penny candy. You get 100 pieces. Where's the tax at, actually? How did that all work out? I don't know. But anyways, 100 pieces of candy, and you're going to knock out a solid half of that bag in a day. Can you imagine all the sugar that's just getting siphoned into my brain? You know, if we think about, you know, the 2-liter sodas, and we think about, you know, all of the pastries and the donuts and the cakes and the cookies and all of these different things that are just, I'm inundated with this stuff growing up. What kind of effect is that happening on our brain? When we talk about, you know, somebody having a, you know, blood sugar high, we think, you know, that's some kind of funny term. It's not funny. All right. There's literally a big shift taking place in our brain. And when brain cells start to get damaged from the abnormal amount of sugar, and also the sensitivity of those cells to uptake glucose can go down. We start to lose that sensitivity. That satellite dish that's receiving that data from the glucose can start to basically close off, get smaller, or even get broken. And you can't have this glucose just running freely around within that incredible brain of yours. So this process of insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance in the brain is incredibly detrimental. One of the leading causes that we know now of Alzheimer's disease. So all of this tying together with statin use, increasing the risk and the incidence of insulin resistance as well, we got to do better. So many people have no idea about that. This is why conversations like this are so important, to expand our knowledge base, to look at the bigger picture. Is that the solution? Because for the pharmaceutical industry, it absolutely is a solution. It's a $30 billion a year solution. They're making bank, but are they saving lives? Have heart disease deaths gone down? Hell no, absolutely not. Not even close. 630,000 a year on average. This past year in 2020, almost 700,000 people died from heart disease. And it's a footnote. We got to do better. We got to do better. So these are the 3 major types of fats that the human brain is actually made of. All right. Phospholipids, sphingolipids, cholesterol. All right. Shout out to all 3 of these fellas. All right. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, phospholipids are made almost entirely out of omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA. Now, this is a building block. So many of these compounds, even with cholesterol and the astrocytes, this is why we need to provide our bodies with the raw materials, the building blocks to make these nutrients, to allow the cells to do the jobs that they're able to do. This is why real food matters. We can't get those nutrients, the building blocks for our astrocytes to do their job on ding dongs. Okay. And shout out to some people might not even know what ding dongs are. Okay. At this point, I think they're getting phased out. No, they're back actually, because Hostess was tanking and they made a big comeback. But I swear, like even the names that they gave these foods were just disrespecting us. All right. Take these ding dongs. All right. Here's some ho-hos. Ho-ho. Are you kidding me? They're so blatant with it, you know? So anyways, but we can't get those kind of building blocks from those types of foods. It's going to come from real whole foods. This is why this matters. But specifically, let's talk about DHA and EPA. Docosahexaenoic acid and eicosapentaenoic acid, DHA and EPA. These two omega-3s are some of the most vital and important nutrients for the human brain. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition discovered that increasing dietary levels of DHA was able to improve both memory and reaction time in healthy test subjects. This is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. Gold standard. It's gold standard. We got a specific implement here. We know that adding in DHA specifically helps to improve our memory just within a matter of months. Improve reaction time in a matter of months. Beautiful, beautiful. These omega-3s are so critical, DHA and EPA, to the structural integrity of the brain that a study published in the journal Neurology, using MRIs to actually analyze and look at the brains of study participants, found that people consuming the lowest amount of EPA and DHA in their diets had the highest rate of brain shrinkage. So the people consuming the lowest amount of DHA and EPA had the most accelerated shrinkage taking place of their freaking brain. The structural integrity of the brain itself, it is made of these fats. It's important. And again, these omega-3s, these are the building blocks of our phospholipids. All right, you don't want that. You don't want your brain shriveling up. Nothing shriveled around here. We don't want that, okay? We don't want that on a day-to-day basis. We want, never mind. So here's what the research stated. They found that folks who were consuming less than 4 grams of DHA per day had the highest rates of brain shrinkage, while those who ate 6 grams or more a day had the healthiest shrink-proof brains. All right. So DHA and EPA, this cannot be overstated how important these are. And our big mandate here is food first. That's our mandate. So where are we going to find DHA and EPA? Well, unfortunately, even in my clinical practice many years ago, I was under the impression that all omega-3s were created equal. And so I'm having patients coming in, I'm getting them on chia seed oil, flaxseed oil, hemp seed oil, all these different plant, very concentrated forms of plant omega-3s, which are great, but that is in the form of ALA. And DHA and EPA are the primary components making up what we talked about in the ratios of the human brain if we're talking about the omega-3s. ALA has some roles, largely in energy, right? So being used as a fuel, but not creating the structural integrity. These are called structural fats, all right? So these aren't like storage fats that, if we're talking about like our visceral fat, subcutaneous fat under our skin, those store energy. Structural fats literally create the structure of our bodies. And specifically, we're talking about our brain. So these are wildly important. ALA doesn't do that. And I didn't know. I didn't look at the bigger picture. I wasn't aware of that important tenet. But DHA and EPA are so important that your body can convert some of the ALA you consume from some of those plant sources into DHA and EPA, but you can lose upwards of 90% in that conversion process. It is so inefficient. And this is going to depend on your unique metabolism, microbiome, all these different things. If you can get a little bit more, a little bit less. But the bottom line is I want every single person to make sure you're proactively getting in a high quality source of DHA and EPA. It's one of the most important things for your brain to literally prevent your brain from shrinking. All right, this is super important. So where are we going to find DHA and EPA? Well, the most popular source that's talked about oftentimes is fatty fish, right? So salmon, mackerel, herring, sardines, anchovies. So the weird people who put anchovies on their pizza, they were onto something. And no disrespect if that's you. Being weird is awesome right now because the norm is being unhealthy. That's the norm here in our country at this current time. So we want you to be weird, all right? But anchovies. Now, just like we mentioned earlier, there's actually far more DHA and EPA that you're going to find in the eggs of the fish. So salmon, roe, and caviar can contain up to 3 times more DHA per gram than the best fish sources. And again, I learned this from an incredible neuroscientist, and then being able to analyze her work. And she's actually looking at the brain and seeing, does this have an impact when we add these things in? And for certain, it's really remarkable. So moving on from there, we've got fatty fish. We've got fish eggs. Egg yolks specifically can be a viable source of DHA. Grass-fed beef. Fish oil has the most peer-reviewed evidence as far as when we're talking about DHA and EPA, it's oftentimes fish oil that's used in clinical studies. So there's a lot of data there as well. But now let's get into some vegetarian and vegan options as well, because this needs to be inclusive. No matter where your dietary beliefs reside, I want you to give yourself permission to always do what's best for you. Because what's best for you might be outside of the scope of a particular diet framework. So I just want you to give yourself permission for that. You know, I've seen so many people struggling with their health because they're so bought into a particular diet framework. And we've had many of them on the Model Health Show, the foremost experts in the particular diet frameworks. You know, whether it's a vegan protocol all the way to a carnivore protocol. And these healthcare practitioners, physicians, they're not doing something to be controversial. They're doing it because they've seen success with their patients. And we need to honor that. But we also need to realize that oftentimes when we go into any extreme, most people aren't going to fit into that modus operandi. They're going to exist somewhere in the middle of those things. And so I just want you to sign your own silent permission slip to do what's best for you. Because when we're talking about DHA and EPA, this is serious stuff. If you're not getting this in through your diet, your brain is definitely going to suffer because of it. Again, highest rate of brain shrinkage when we're getting in less than 4 grams per day. So krill oil, Krill oil. Krill oil is an excellent source of DHA and EPA. Now, the interesting thing about krill oil is that it also contains a substantial amount of astaxanthin. All right, astaxanthin is a powerful antioxidant that actually, in many ways, makes DHA and EPA even more bioavailable and helps to prevent it from damage and oxidation. With these omega-3s, we got to keep in mind that they're incredibly sensitive. All right, they're incredibly sensitive to, environmental intrusions. All right, so they're sensitive. They're like the boy band, okay, of this dietary thing. Together, the sensitive singles. Okay, now krill oil is an incredibly viable source, but also this is going to depend on where your ethics lie, because it's a microscopic shrimp, and keyword microscopic, but that can throw people off as well. And so this can be, and I've seen it firsthand for somebody on a vegetarian protocol, and they add in krill oil and their weight starts to come off, their blood sugar starts to normalize, their brain fog starts to go away. All right, I've seen it firsthand more times than I can count, getting somebody's DHA and EPA levels back on point again. So krill oil is going to be a viable option. Microscopic, so tiny. And I often joke that, even if you just like lick the air, you're going to be consuming some sentient beings, some sentient organisms. You just are. So this might be a viable option for a lot of folks. Now, obviously, dietary fats are going to be a critical component of literally building our brain cells, right? Our glial cells, our neurons, and these incredible interactions, the myelin that we talked about. But we cannot abandon the number one thing that the human brain is made of. All right, we've already covered the dry weight of the brain primarily being made of 3 specific dietary fats, but the majority of the human brain, somewhere around the ballpark of about 78%, 78 to even upwards of 80% of the human brain is made of water. How much does this matter? Well, according to the journal Neurology, even short-term dehydration can literally reduce your brain volume It's turning the volume down when you're dehydrated. We want to make sure that it's turned up to the right position, because they also mentioned in this particular study that rehydration rapidly restores brain volume. So when I'm saying your brain is mostly made of water, no, this is very, very serious. And the protective mechanism, the blood-brain barrier, that's making sure that only very specific things are able to enter the very exclusive area within the human brain, water has absolute priority status in being able to make its way into the brain. How does this play out when our brain is dehydrated and we're losing that brain volume? Well, a recent study that was published in the journal Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise found that just a 2% drop in your body's baseline hydration level can create significant mental impairment with tasks that require attention, motor coordination, and also reduction in performance of executive function. So this is things like map recognition with grammatical reasoning, mental math. All of those factors start to decline our ability to do those things, those cognitive abilities, simply based on dehydration. So this is something so simple. Are you doing it? Are you making sure that your brain is hydrated? This is not a joke. Your brain is hungry for water, or should I say, it's thirsty. Your brain is thirsty. So make sure that you're quenching that thirst on a regular basis. Very important, very simple. Now, this is an important caveat because it's not just water. It's not just H2O, some chemical compound that the brain is allowing in. It's water that has structure. These aquaporins, these protein channels that are allowing water to travel and to hydrate our cells. There's a certain structure. There's like a lock and key situation. And what actually helps the brain to retain hydration is electrolytes. It's not just water by itself. Water doesn't exist by itself in nature. It never has. In nature, water is known as a universal solvent. There's always things that it's combining with, specifically minerals. And these minerals, if we're talking about electrolytes, these are specific minerals that carry an electric charge. So important. The brain is critically dependent upon these electrolytes to help to send electrical signals throughout all of the cells of our brains. All right. Fat plays a major role here in the structural integrity of these cells. And myelin, the insulation of the nerves and the electricity being able to fire. But the electricity itself is going to be traveling thanks in large part to these electrolytes. That's how important it is. Take sodium, for example. Not only does this electrolyte help to maintain proper water balance in the brain, come on, right there is important enough. But a study conducted by researchers at McGill University found that sodium functions as a, quote, on-off switch, unquote, in the brain for specific neurotransmitters that support optimal function. We want optimal function. I like that. And also, sodium functions in protecting the brain against numerous diseases, neurodegenerative diseases. It's that important. But again, it's one of those things that's villainized. Sodium's bad. End of story. No. It's a primary electrolyte driving many of the processes of the body. Yes, sodium can be a problem, but there's no context. There's no nuance. Sodium, if we're talking, it's been villainized because of hypertension. And yes, a certain amount of sodium can cause hypertension. But here's the issue. The majority of sodium consumed in the average American's diet is coming from processed food. It's about 70% of the sodium people are consuming. Highly refined, really crappy versions of sodium. And sodium and salt are two different things, but they're used often interchangeably. Salt, typical table salt that we tend to think about, is 60% chloride and 40% sodium. But there's other types of salts as well. There's potassium salt, there's magnesium salt. Salt is one of those things that throughout our evolution, and even just in nature, animals, if we just we'll stick to the mammals. Have you ever seen those goats that like climb up on the side of like of a dam or like on the side of a mountain? Like why are they, and they're like sideways, and they're basically the wall is straight up vertical almost, and they're just literally just on the side of the wall, propped up there, and they're trying to inch their way up to spots where they can lick a little bit of salt. They're risking it all. They're risking it all for a little dabble, a couple of those goat licks of some salt. It's that important. And by the way, if you don't see me on the video, I've been standing sideways like on a wall this whole time. So weird. But it is that vital. When salt is not available, it's needed to run so many different neurological processes, just overall for our health. In our culture, is it a deficiency? High quality sources. Yes, absolutely it's a deficiency. So we need to make sure we're getting high quality sources of sodium. Because a meta-analysis published in the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews uncovered that study participants placed on low sodium diets did, yes, have keyword slightly, lower blood pressure in the short term, but found that the restricted sodium led to rebound hypertension or high blood pressure because it ended up elevating triglycerides, elevating stress hormones, and accordingly elevating their blood pressure. There needs to be some balance here. There needs to be balance. And we talk about that more in depth in Eat Smarter as well. But also a study conducted by researchers at Harvard Medical School, and this was published in the journal Metabolism, found that low salt intake directly increases insulin resistance in healthy test subjects. We need the full story here. We need the full story. Sodium is incredibly important, specifically in the context of functioning of our amazing, powerful brain. Also, this is a fascinating new study, and this was published in the journal Neuron, found that another electrolyte, another type of salt, magnesium, is able to restore critical brain plasticity and improve cognitive function. Neuroplasticity is the ability of our brains to adapt and change. That's what we need in our world today more than ever. We need that ability for our brains to adapt and change. Here's another one. This is a double-blind, placebo-controlled study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, found that improving magnesium levels in adult test subjects, they were aged 50 to 70, with already noted cognitive decline, increasing and improving their magnesium levels was able to reverse their brain aging by over 9 years. It made their brains functionally younger by getting their magnesium levels optimized. Why is it such a big deal? The majority of our citizens here in the United States are deficient in magnesium, and they're deficient in the right type of sodium. That's why this is so important. Again, the tenet is food first. Great sources of magnesium include avocados, pumpkin seeds, almonds, dark chocolate, leafy greens, black beans, fatty fish, and many other foods. But magnesium gets used rapidly in the body. We need copious amounts and also high quality sodium. Now we're going to dive into the final component here on this episode, really addressing the primary things that our incredible brain is actually made of. We talked a little bit about water and hydration and electrolytes, but really focused the majority of this episode on the 3 specific types of fats that our incredible brain is made of. So I want to provide a few more specific foods that really help and support in that primary role with the performance of that fat. All right. Having a fat head, having a fat brain is actually a really, really good thing. So one of these foods that has some interesting interaction here with the fats that we talked about earlier is broccoli. Now, broccoli itself, it has a crown to it, a little bit of an analogy or similarity there, but it's a rich source of the fat-soluble vitamin K. Now, this fat-soluble vitamin has been found to be a critical component in the synthesis of the structural brain fat, Sphingolipids. According to data cited in the journal Nutrition Reviews, the interaction between vitamin K and sphingolipids plays a major role in our cognitive function. And on top of that, adequate consumption of vitamin K from foods like broccoli has been found to improve our episodic memory. Our episodic memory is a form of explicit memory that involves conscious recollection of information. So it's kind of important. In addition, broccoli is also an excellent source of nutrients called isothiocyanates. And these powerful compounds have been found to help reduce brain inflammation and provide protection against neurodegenerative diseases. Broccoli and its other family members in the cruciferous family are great sources of isothiocyanates, but broccoli is the crown jewel of the category for sure. And one other food that has wonderful brain healthy fats contained within it are walnuts. And if you think about the doctrine of signatures and how certain foods look like certain body parts, the walnut looks eerily similar to the human brain. And compounds found in walnuts have been shown to help scrub your brain clear of harmful amyloid beta peptide that leads to bona fide amyloid plaque buildup in the brain. Data highlighted in the journal Neurochemical Research demonstrate that walnuts have the potential to reduce oxidative stress, reduce brain inflammation, and protect your brain cells from early demise. And how does this show up in the real world? Well, walnuts are packed with brain healthy vitamins, minerals, and fats, but a recent study conducted by researchers at UCLA suggests that eating a handful of walnuts per day may help to boost memory, concentration, and the speed at which your brain processes information. All right, another healthy, fat-rich food for our cognitive health. And number 5 is that the human brain does go on sleep mode, but it is still incredibly active all the time, even at rest. We might think that the brain is maybe shutting off, or different parts of the brain might be shutting off. We even have this idea in culture that we're only using a small percentage of our brains, like 10%, for example, or our brain's potential. But that really comes from the realm of personal development, not from the realm of science, because there's not recesses of your brain that are just like, I'm not doing anything, I'm not working. They're not tapping into their true potential. Our whole brain is functioning and working at all times. However, we have massive, really infinite capacity for our brains to work even better. That's the key. All right. So it's not that we're only using 10% of our brain. We're using all of our brain, but the question is, are we using it very well? And so our brain is also very active even at rest. So even when we go on a sleep mode, the brain is shifting over. And part of the reason that we know you're asleep is that we see a change in your brain waves. All right. So the rhythm, the electrical output of the human brain itself. Right now, when we're awake, we're in a state of beta brainwave frequencies, maybe even a little bit of gamma. All right, gamma phi. Shout out to the Greeks. But these are some of the more normal waking states. But we can also move into a little bit of alpha as well. That's when we're really in a focused state, really locked in, or even in flow, for example. Much more clear, much more relaxed, and much more present. We can really tip into alpha. And then from there, we can go to theta. And this is when we're really transitioning into sleep. And even delta is where we have that kind of deep anabolic rhythm taking place. All right, so we're transitioning in and out of these states during sleep. And this is how we really know you're asleep. Sleep is so weird. It's such a weird phenomenon. And the way that we really know that you're sleeping and not pretending to be asleep. Do you remember pretending to be asleep when you were a kid? You know, you pretending to be asleep. So, you know, maybe your parent comes and like wakes you up and, you know, gives you maybe a little snuggle or a little bother you, or your sibling or whatever, so they don't bother you. You know, have you ever pretended to be asleep? How we know that you're asleep is we see a change in your brain wave frequencies. All right, now there are some advanced meditators that can actually tap into and dip into delta brainwave frequencies at will. All right, so we can train ourselves to get to these very relaxed, in touch, just tapped in states. However, for the majority of us, we're just running around and this stuff is just happening automatically. But this speaks to the power of us getting some brain training and really starting to take control of the ability for us to stay focused, to improve our attention span, to improve our memory. The list goes on and on, by us understanding and training our brains and even helping to modulate our brain wave frequencies. So again, a lot is taking place when we're physically inactive. The brain is still very active. And another one of the things that's taking place, even speeding up when we're asleep, happening in the brain, is the action of the brain's cleaning system. The janitor system is showing up in the evening to keep the building clean. All right, and this is called your glymphatic system. The human brain itself, again, we've got trillions of processes taking place in our brains every moment. And there's a lot of metabolic waste that takes place. And we need to keep the house clean. We do not want buildup taking place. And one of the things that's also well noted and seen in Alzheimer's isn't just insulin resistance in the brain, as we touched on a tiny bit earlier, but it's also the inability of the brain to clean itself, the buildup of amyloid beta plaque, for example. And so having the opportunity for us to understand what also has been changing in our society recently, and that is more and more sleep deprivation. It's become a commonality where, again, we evolved in places where we had natural day and night cycles. Maybe we can tinker with that a little bit, but now it's society wide, where we can artificially manipulate and change these patterns. We can create daytime effectively with our artificial lights, and we can just ignore real daytime, and people getting access to getting outside and getting some sun on their skin. Or if they do go outside, we're walking around with sunglasses on and not letting our optical receptors to pull that light in and help to inform the circadian timing system. The list goes on, but if you understand this, that our sleep hygiene has been declining and Alzheimer's has been increasing, these two things are not an accident, all right? Because the greatest time of renovation and house cleaning for the brain is when you're asleep. The glymphatic system to clean house in your brain is 10 times more active when you're asleep than when you're awake. 10 times more active, not 2 times, not 5, 10 times more active, getting to work and cleaning house. All right, so this is another one of the things that, again, you might go into sleep mode, but the brain is still incredibly active. Another thing that the brain is doing while you are on sleep mode is kicking up something called memory processing. And a lot of that takes place actually during your REM sleep, right? So rapid eye movement sleep. This is where a lot of dreaming takes place. And it's during that time that your brain is taking what you're learning, even right now, if it is of importance to you, and putting it into your short-term memories, filing it away and making it something that is a little bit more permanent than something that's just here today, gone today, here in this moment, gone in this moment. We can actually, if there's something that we wanting to learn and pick this up, a lot of the filing takes place when we're asleep. Really, really powerful stuff. So even though your brain can go onto sleep mode, it is still very active. So that's number 5 on our list of these 10 strange but very true facts about the human brain. Now we're going to move on to number 6. And number 6 is your incredible brain. As powerful as it is, it's also incredibly fragile. All right, the human brain itself is the consistency of soft butter. All right, so this is the butter that you leave out. Some people have like a little butter tray. You can get into a debate about families like this. Some people believe the butter should be in the refrigerator at all times. Some people believe you should leave the butter out. So there's like this room temperature, it just kind of, leaves out in the butter tray. I'm not saying which is best, but there's a debate on the streets. But when you leave it out, the butter gets soft. So soft butter, that's the consistency of your brain. It is very, very delicate. And so this is why the human brain is the only organ that's fully encased in hard bone. All right, so your cranium, your skull, is protecting that delicate brain of yours. It is so powerful. There's so much change. Part of the reason that it is so delicate is that it is also so malleable and changeable, right? The plasticity of the brain, it has to be able to change quite a bit every single microsecond. So this is why it remains and has this soft consistency, because it has to be very changeable and adaptable. So keep this in mind, that we want to be adamant about protecting our brain and not necessarily being a little bit more cautious about participating in things that might rattle our brain around. There's a lot of work being done around being more mindful of brain injuries and even what we would consider small things, even though they can be absolutely devastating, which is concussions, for example. And we've had on one of the foremost experts in the world, if not the foremost expert in the world, Dr. Daniel Amen, and he has the largest database of SPECT imaging. So SPECT imaging is actually looking at blood flow in the brain and being able to get a peek and see what's happening in that very protective brain of yours, taking a peek behind the cranium and seeing what's happening. And his work has been utilized in some of the big changes that have been worked towards, or they're working towards, which again, there's so many levels to this, but with the NFL, for example, and his work was included in the work that was kind of brought to the forefront in the movie Concussion as well. He really helped to support in that research. So Dr. Daniel Amen, and we'll put one of his interviews for you here in the show notes. And I'll tell you right now, he is very much not a proponent of contact sports that has your brain rattling around. He gives the example that your brain is sort of like in a very tight jar of water. You got your cerebral spinal fluid and your brain is just kind of just floating around in there, but it's in tight quarters, and hard hits and things knocking against your body, your brain is just kind of just shaking around in there, and things can get damaged. Things can get disrupted. So we want to be a little bit more careful about this. It's not that these contact sports are inherently bad. It's a big part of our evolution as a species. You've got the warrior guild, people getting out and competing and doing various things. We just need to be more mindful of this. And if we are doing any types of contact sports, we need to be even more adamant about brain health and brain hygiene to help to heal up and support the brain proactively, protectively, preventatively, but also providing the things for the brain to heal or recover as fast as we possibly can. So again, that's number 6 here on our list of these 10 strange but true facts about the human brain. Your brain is the consistency of soft butter. All right, we're going to move on to number 7. Number 7 of these strange but true facts is that as complex as your brain is, as powerful as your brain is, it's mostly water. It's mostly made of water. Your brain is approximately 78% water. It is the most water-dominant organ in your body after your lungs. Your brain truly is, it's a liquid foundation. It has this incredible fluidity to it, if you really think about it. And this is the amazing thing about water, is that it can have fluidity, but it can also create structure, right? So keeping this in mind and remembering about the blood-brain barrier, you have express pass entry for water to be able to make its way into the brain. Now, the question should immediately be, if we're talking about optimal brain health and brain functionality, what happens when we are dehydrated? Well, according to the journal Neurology, even short-term dehydration literally reduces the volume of your brain. Again, that's just short-term dehydration. Shrinks your brain. All right? It is that serious and it's that simple. We have a tremendous amount of gates with the blood-brain barrier that allows in water. The brain needs water in copious amounts because it's made primarily of water. Every action and activity, every nerve firing, every activity of myelin getting laid down, every neurotransmitter, all of it's happening in a water medium. Your brain requires water in order to fortify its function and to maintain its form. It is that important. The study also noted that rehydration, which is the opposite of dehydration, rehydration rapidly restores brain volume. All right, that's the good news. So wouldn't now be a good time to get a sip? All right, wouldn't now be a good time to make sure that we are hydrating our brain? Another study cited in Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise found that just a 2% drop in your body's baseline hydration level can lead to impairment in tasks requiring attention, motor coordination, and executive function. All right, just a 2% drop. Water is that important for the form and function of our incredible brain. All right, so keep that in mind. If we're looking at the next fancy pants nootropic, if we're looking at improving our cognitive function, water first. It's the primary foundational thing. If we're missing out on this, we're really missing the point. Information running between the neurons in your brain is happening at mind-blowing speeds. The fastest speed for information to pass between neurons, noted so far by our current level of science that we have at this point, is noted to be traveling at about 250 miles per hour. All right. Incredibly fast transmissions are taking place between the neurons in our brain. All right. Much, much faster than we can comprehend. So much magic is taking place in our amazing brains. So please understand, we're able to process a tremendous amount of information very, very quickly. And these things are happening simultaneously. Your brain is running processes to keep the sensation and awareness in your toes on point, while beating your heart, while digesting your food, while producing new stem cells, while the list goes on and on, while regulating your body temperature, while regulating your cognitive ability and your function and your focus and your vision, and the list goes on and on, all happening together at lightning speed. That's how powerful that amazing brain of yours is. All right, so shout out to the Quicksilver brain that we have. Shout out to the Flash. All right, shout out to that amazing fast brain. All right, now we're going to move on. We got number 9 here on our list of 10 strange but true facts about the human brain. Number 9 is, despite compromising only 2% of the body's mass, our brains actually consume 20% of our body's oxygen supply. All right, it's not just hungry for food, it's also hungry for oxygen. So that blood-brain barrier is also allowing in certain types of gases, namely oxygen, to be utilized by our brain cells. A lot of the processes taking place in the brain are aerobic type processes that require oxygen to run optimally. So if you've ever thought about that before, when we're taking a breath, when we're breathing in, it's not just going to our lungs, it's going to our brain as well. All right, so we want to make sure that we're breathing with some efficacy and effectiveness. Definitely check out the episode that we did with New York Times bestselling author James Nestor. That one is a game changer. And talking about his incredible project that really highlighted and brought to the forefront the power of our breathing. So that is number 9 on our list, is that even though our brain is only 2% of our body's mass, it's consuming a lion's share of our oxygen intake. All right, now we're at our final one, number 10 on our list of the 10 strange but true facts about the human brain. And number 10 is that your brain is completely unique. Your incredible brain is not the same as anyone else who's ever existed or who will ever exist. Your experiences, including what happens to you in your life and what you learn, wire your brain in a completely unique way. And that wiring continues to develop as you learn and experience more. It is a completely unique design, unique to you. Your brain is special. It's a one of one. And this speaks to how special you are as well. According to renowned neuroscientist Dr. Caroline Leaf, she shared that our amazing brains, they aren't just the outpicturing of what's happened in our lives and the world around us and that kind of educational input. She shared that our thoughts themselves create our brain. The flaw is that we tend to think that our thoughts are just contained solely in our brain. But as Dr. Caroline Leaf shared, even here on a recent episode of the Model Health Show, our mind, which is far more expansive than just our body, our mind is actually creating our brain. And our thoughts, our ability to think externally of our circumstances, as we thinketh, so are we creating it. And no, I'm not trying to do a Mike Tyson impersonation. As we thinketh, so is he. As a man thinketh, so is he. That's the powerful tenet. And it's really speaking of creation. And it's really speaking of the power of our thoughts to create our reality and literally to create our brain. Because as we're thinking, we're creating we're planting new seeds. We're planting new potential trees that are going to grow and bear fruits. And again, Dr. Leaf really articulated that. And if you watch the video of that episode, she actually gave and showed some visual representations of what happens when we plant a new thought tree into our brain. Because again, our thoughts literally are creating our brain itself. And you have the ability to think the thoughts that you want to think. We've unfortunately been programmed to believe that we are simply the result of our environment. We're simply the result of what we've been indoctrinated with. We are thinking based on our environment alone, but that's not true. That's not true about you, and it never has been. We can give silent permission for that to be our reality. But the truth is, you get to think the thoughts that you want to think. You get to think thoughts that empower you or disempower you. Both are true. You get to pick. But I want you to know today and moving forward that you have the power to choose your thinking, and your thinking will literally create your brain. And from there, as we're creating this powerful source of information storage and processing, your thoughts are also going to create the outpicturing of your body. Your thoughts are going to create the outpicturing of your feeling and your emotion, because every thought that you think also has correlating chemistry that's released in your body as well. These can be thoughts that produced abundant anti-aging, rejuvenative hormones and neurotransmitters associated with things like positive disposition, happiness, joy, peace. Or we can have thoughts that produce chemistry in our bodies associated with stress and fear and a sense of anxiety and depression. We have the power to determine our thoughts. Now, again, many of these things are happening on automatic, but we are able to change them nevertheless. You are that powerful. You are that powerful. But how do we stack conditions in our favor so that we can think the thoughts that we want to think? That's really about understanding the power of environment and intentionally putting yourself in environments that are nurturing, that are encouraging you and reminding you of how powerful you are. Because it's not just the thoughts that we think. Of course, it is a powerful first domino, but it's also understanding that it makes it exceedingly more difficult to think the thoughts that we want to think when we're in pain, when our bodies are in a state of unrest. It's not impossible to think healthy thoughts when you are deficient in key nutrients, when you're experiencing acute pain or chronic disease. It's not impossible, but it is harder, because our wiring is such that that pain is getting fed to your brain and it's informing you that something is wrong. But we can get caught in a vicious circle by believing that that's all that is wrong. Something's wrong, is pain. Because you can think externally of those things and start to change the chemistry, start to change the cells that are getting made, starting to change, helping to accelerate healing and support healing rather than inhibit it. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to optimize your mindset to achieve your goals faster.
All psychotropics are anesthetics. They're versions of anesthetics, so they basically numb the brain. Part of the reason why people are dying 18 to 25 years younger is not helping people manage mind, just stuffing down the symptoms with a drug.